I'm happy to welcome all of my fellow board members and call the March 23rd, 2021 school board meeting to order. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Jenkins?
Present.
Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
And Mr. Susan?
Present.
Please be reminded that school board meetings will be held in a manner consistent with other district meetings and activities. All attendees must wear a face mask covering the nose and mouth at all times when not more than 6 feet from the nearest person. Your cooperation is greatly appreciated. We will now hold a moment of silence in memory of one of our BPS family members who recently passed away, Keith Johnson, a custodian from Jackson Middle School. We invite the viewing audience to join us. Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I would like to offer my fellow board members and Dr. Mullins the opportunity to recognize students, staff, or members of the community who'd like to kick us off this evening. Ms. Campbell, welcome back, by the way, in person.
Thank you. It's good to be back in the boardroom. So I didn't think I'd have very many because it was spring break and wasn't a lot going on, but I do have 3. First of all, today, March 23rd, marks the 1-year anniversary. You know, it's going to have something to do with COVID, right? With lots of anniversaries, but it's the 1-year anniversary of when our food and nutrition services staff adjusted their superhero capes and started serving our children nonstop. And so during the distance learning shutdown, all during the summertime, and then continuing through this year with all the extra precautions and doing, doing e-learning, curbside, whatever, to feeding, by the way, not just our students, but children from babies all the way up to 18 through the summer programs. They just have done such great work. So I just wanted to highlight that because today is the 1-year anniversary from when that all began. And they stepped right into the fray when we really didn't know hardly anything about COVID and what it was going to be. And they fearlessly stepped forward, and just so thankful for all of them. Also, next week starts kindergarten kickoff week. And just wanted to highlight that for everybody who has an upcoming kindergartner. It'll be a chance to go ahead and get pre-registered for next year. And I want to especially shout out our partner, Staples, who is offering every family who pre-registers their kindergartner some coupon goodies. And so make sure that you take advantage of that this week. And also there's going to be, and if you've already been in kindergarten, you can't do it, sorry. But they also have a social media contest that's going on this week. So make sure you check out the Facebook page, but also go to the website so you can pre-register your kindergartner for next year. Finally, I don't know if this is a shameless plug or a shameless plea, but this Friday night, I will be joining several of our principals, as well as a few city council members and the chief of police in West Melbourne. We're going to be taken into police custody on the roof of Chick-fil-A on Palm Bay Road. And so I just want to ask people who might not want, if you want to see me on the roof of Chick-fil-A, then okay, fine, I'll go up on the roof of Chick-fil-A, but please donate money to get me down. But I want to give a shout out to from our different schools, Ms. Vincent and Ms. Batman from West Melbourne School for Science, Ms. Overbeck from Meadow Lane Primary, Ms. Stein and Ms. Barnett from Meadow Lane Intermediate, Ms. Thomas from Central, and Ms. Davids from Imagine Schools, who will all be joining us. We're raising money for the Special Olympics, and all of them are great sports. To get up on the roof of Chick-fil-A to raise money. And we have many of our students here in BPS who participate in the Special Olympics. So it's really awesome opportunity. And if you want to come by on Friday night and get some Chick-fil-A and throw some money in the Campbell bucket, I would certainly appreciate it. 6 to 9 on Friday night.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Ms. Jenkins, you look ready?
Yeah. Is it too late to get on the roof?
I don't know. I'll contact you with Officer Paz.
Okay, I'll get on the roof. I have a couple tonight as well. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to our sheriff's office for our last meeting. I just want to say I appreciate all of you and everyone who came out to support us and keep everyone safe here at the meeting. We all appreciate you. I also want to do a very special shout out to the vaccine distribution that took place for our employees 50 or over at Vera High School. I was so grateful to be there. I was kind of just fulfilling a role of cheerleader down the aisles as people waited their 15 minutes to get out. The DOH, I can't thank you enough for how seamless that was. Everyone who went through that was out in like max 25 minutes. And they were all so grateful. You could literally see the weight coming off of their shoulders. Everyone was so thankful. Some people were literally brought to tears for having the opportunity. So thank you to all of our staff and our team that made that happen, but also thank you for the DOH for being so willing to pull that together for us on a special Saturday, and at Vera High School as well, for all of the staff there for inviting us to host it there. I do want to just do a little shout out to Take Stock in Children. There is someone named Michael Pierce, who is a graduate of that program and now a mentor of their program, who ran 48 miles in 48 hours and raised $5,000 for the program. And so I just want to do a quick shout out for that. And I also was brought to my attention that a new scholarship through Space Coast Pride, it was renamed the Randall D. Kelly Randall Memorial Scholarship, dedicated to the memory of Miss Randall, whose service, generosity, and passion changed the lives of many LGBTQ youth. They have a scholarship right now. There are 2 scholarships available. They're $1,000 each, and you can apply by May 1st at spacecoastpride.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Ms. McDougall?
Well, Ms. Jenkins just really took the one I had, which was a big shout out to the Department of Health for the Saturday vaccine. As Ms. Jenkins stated, it was amazing. I think we did 1,300 people came through, not only staff, but I know we had some law enforcement there also. So a big shout out to our staff who put it together, to our food service, and to the Department of Health. So it was very seamless, and I agree, everybody was very happy that that was available for them. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Susan?
Yeah, first off, I wanted to say I was happy because I went and visited the Career and Technical Aviation Program over at O'Galley. It happened to be the same time as a conflict that we had an audit committee meeting. But I was over there, and when we were there, the company that I brought there was going to donate 2 engines to the place, which is a huge, substantial donation to the group. But what was really cool is that I was there, and then all of a sudden, not a week later, we have the governor who comes and unveils his entire career and technical program inside of, for what he's going to be funding through CARES Act, through jobs programs and everything else in our program, in our school. And that was a huge opportunity for the governor to come, but then also something that Dr. Mullins said is that in O'Galley High School, we actually have land, sea, and water career and technical programs, and not many, in air, sorry. And not many people understand that we have a marine mechanics program, we have the aviation program, and we also have the automotive program. And there is nowhere else in the country that has that. And for us to be honored to, regardless of party affiliation, and I've been around multiple governors from multiple, parties, it's nice to know that we are part of what's happening as far as when they want to make the announcements to come to because of what we do. And that's hats off to Ms. Rutledge and Dr. Sullivan for all their hard work and the commitment that you did, Dr. Mullins, to creating that career and technical program and driving that, because we are going to lead, and as we go further into the space industry, we are going to lead that programs into it, and we will become the lead in the country as far as career and technical. And so that you guys know, when you have the second largest job growth area and industry growth area in the United States, you have to fill that with career and technical pipelines. And that is a huge burden on a school district that doesn't receive any extra funding to do so. And so when Dr. Mullins put forth the effort with the school board to make that happen, we are not only ensuring that we are prepared for tomorrow, but also the economic drive that this county is will be ensured, because none of the companies come because of tax incentives anymore. They come because of human resources and labor. And having that set up is all a shout out to you. And I'm sorry it took a second, but when that moment happened, it was one of the most amazing things because it's just all coming together. And I wanted to say thank you for your leadership on that. Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. He deserves that. I also wanted to say, the Department of Health, thank you, obviously. One of the things that we dealt with as a school district is that our teachers were not first in line, but we found a way to get them there. And when we sit back and we look at the way that this thing rolled out from before, there are heroes inside of our school district that you'll never hear from. Teachers who had 30, 20, sometimes 25 kids inside of a classroom in the middle of a COVID environment, worried about whether they're going to get COVID or not, and all being at the bottom of the line for our COVID vaccinations. That was a tough time. And our teachers and our staff and everybody else rose to the occasion. So I wanted to say thank you for everybody that got to the DOH and was working with them this past weekend over at Vieira High School to get our vaccinations, and I look forward to more to come. And I did want to say, if everybody's paying attention, 5 of the last 7 days in our COVID numbers have been below 100. And that is slowly starting to come lower. And if you look at previous weeks, we were in the 200s, then the 100 to 150s, then the 100s to 150s, now the 50s to 100 and going into 130 and coming back down. But we're starting to see the numbers come down. And whether you're on the right or you're on the left, we all went through this. And it's coming to a point where we all can look at what we did in multiple areas and say that we tried through this pandemic to do the right thing. And our staff and everybody else, I'm just proud that we're coming to a point where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I just want to say thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Dr. Mullins?
Thank you, Ms. Belford. I want to give a shout out to our academic staff who put together, they found a way to overcome the challenges of not being able to bring multiple schools and multiple academic teams together for the Superintendent's Academic Challenge that took place the Friday before spring break. I had the privilege of joining them virtually to announce the winners. So I'd like to announce those winners to everybody, but before I do that, I want to give just a huge thank you to the 2 primary coordinators. That's Frank Strockman in our ET department and Kim Garten, resource teacher for social studies. They created the academic plan program. They created a virtual escape room that the kids had to work in teams online to get through and be successful. But they were also supported by the staff, Nancy Hauser, resource teacher Dawn Bronstein, part of our tech integrator. She's a manager there. And then our district administrators, Molly Vega and Sherry Bowman. Just 16 high schools came together and competed at a high academic level. So proud of the work that was done to overcome the challenges of that. And the winners are: 3rd place was Vieira High School, 2nd place, Edgewood Junior Senior High, and our first place team this year was West Shore Junior Senior High School. So congratulations to all of the competitors in our academic team, but to those schools particularly. And then last, I'd like to give a shout out to Space Coast Junior Senior High. I don't know if we've made a big announcement of this yet, but their Air Force Junior Reserve Officer Training Program has been selected to be in the inaugural cohort of high schools for the U.S. Space Force Junior ROTC. This designation, let's give it. There have been only 10 designations of that kind so far across the country, and Space Coast Junior Senior High School is the only high school in Florida that has been designated or approved to be a Space Force Junior ROTC. So congratulations to that program. This board has certainly continued a commitment and prioritization of our junior reserve officer training programs, and I thank you. And it's just another example that we provide all of our students many avenues to find their pathway onto post-high school success. So that's exciting to know that we're one of 10 in the country.
Dr. Mullins, what kind of capital improvements are we going to have to do to have the Space Force out there? I mean, we're going to have launch pads and, I mean, what are we doing here? We're going to have a workshop on what we can put out there? I mean,
I'm sure the Space Force is covering all those costs, Mr. Susan.
Either that or we'll bring them over to Patrick or up to KFC.
I'm just looking forward to what happens out there at Space Coast. It's going to be fun.
Right?
Great news.
All right, so one of the great things about going last on recognitions is everyone covers pretty much everything on my list before I get there. So lots of celebration all around and agreement with all of the recognitions thus far. So the only thing that I have left on my list is a huge happy birthday to Mr. Susan, who is, his birthday is today, and he sits here with us at a board meeting. So happy birthday.
Thanks. There's 5 children. Right. There's 5 children that are tearing up Longhorn right now. I just left there, and they are excited. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Thanks.
All right, that is going to move us into the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Mullins?
Ms. Belford and members of the board, on tonight's agenda, we have administrative staff recommendations, 21 consent items, and 4 action items. Changes made to the agenda since it was first released to the public on March 16, 2021 are as follows. Item A7 on administrative staff recommendations received revisions. Items F10 on interlocal agreement CARES Act funding extension, F16 on termination of instructional employee, and F17 on the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplement Appropriations Act are additions.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, who is my second.
Me.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
Here we go. Here we go. I was just looking at it. Here we go. I knew it.
All right. And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins, will you please let us know about the administrative staff recommendations?
There are 2 individuals under this category.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Jenkins or Ms. Campbell? Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
I want to discuss the teacher. But I'll make a motion.
And the motion passes 5-0. We are now at public comments. If we have more speakers than seating inside the boardroom, additional speakers may be waiting outside and escorted in at the appropriate time. Speakers are required to wear a face mask covering the nose and mouth while walking to the microphones and when traveling back to his or her seats. As long as you maintain 6 feet from the nearest person, you may remove your mask while speaking, but please remember to wear your mask as you return to your seat. Hand sanitizer and sanitizing wipes are provided at the microphone should you choose to use them. Though School Board Policy 0169.1 limits to 30 minutes the portion of the meeting during which the public is invited to participate and provide public comment, the policy further provides that this time limit may be extended by a vote of the board. We have 31 speakers this evening, which is going to take us past that time limit. So if board members are in support, I will entertain a motion to extend our public speaking as you wish. Ms. Campbell, are you moving to incorporate all public speakers in that first section?
I'm sorry. I move that we take the first 10 here and finish our business and then move the rest to the end.
Okay.
Unless someone has signed up to speak on a specific topic, do we have agenda item? Because I would hate for those to be at the end if we've already done.
Yeah. So your request is to move those speakers who are speaking on the agenda items to the first 10 slots and then move the remainder of the public speakers to the latter part of the meeting?
All right, do we have more than 10 to speak on agenda items?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Campbell to take the speakers scheduled to speak on an agenda item during our first session of public speaking and move the remainder of the speakers to the end. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on that? Ms. Escobar, do you need a voice vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0, Ms. Escobar. Thank you. Okay, we will start with our agenda-related speakers. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. We have a clock in front of me to help you keep track of your time. When your time is over, you will be asked to stop and allow the next speaker his or her turn. Please pay close attention to the expectations for decorum as they will be closely followed this evening. Always keep in mind that reasonable decorum is expected at all times, and your statement should be directed to the board chairman. As chairman, I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when time is up. It's personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Should an individual not observe proper etiquette, I may request the individual leave the meeting. Let's all encourage an environment appropriate for our children who may be present or are watching from home. Please note that in order to proceed with the business portion of the meeting, board members will not have the opportunity to respond to speakers during or immediately following public comments. I may, however, direct you to specific staff members to assist, or board members may request that I add your topic as a discussion item at the end of the meeting. We will begin with our first 3 speakers on the agenda item, which would be Anthony Colucci, Mark Levine, and then Kyle Savage. Mr. Colucci?
My name is Anthony Colucci. I'm the president of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. Tonight, this board has a very serious decision to make regarding the termination of an outstanding teacher, Allison Enright. I realize that employee terminations are not something that this board takes lightly, and as you know, whenever they've come before this board, I've been very unassuming in my role. With the possible termination of Ms. Enright tonight, it is my belief that none of you want to terminate Ms. Enright. You believe that you have to terminate her. You are all aware of the extenuating circumstances surrounding this difficult case. With that said, my request is that if you believe that you cannot vote against the termination, at least put a pause on the termination. As a teacher's livelihood depends on this, I request that you take some additional time to thoroughly explore all possibilities. Do not rush this major decision for an excellent teacher. On another note, I'm pleased to announce that BFT was selected to receive a $50,000 Innovation Fund COVID-19 response grant from the American Federation of Teachers. The grant will support children's social and emotional health, as well as support educators by developing their health and well-being. Without a doubt, if students are going to be successful academically, we must ensure their social emotional needs are being met. And improving employees' mental health creates a healthier and more productive workforce. We're excited about the positive impact this grant will have on our schools. On the student side, the grant will expand the Sources of Strength program currently in use by the district by funding the program at least 5 Title I elementary schools. On the teacher side, Sources of Strength will provide a virtual training for teachers that focuses on teacher mental health. We will offer this workshop to 500 teachers throughout the spring and summer. Additionally, the grant will capitalize on the resources already available to employees through our Employee Assistance Plan. EAP provides short-term counseling, financial, legal, and other work-life support services to our employees and families. In addition, EAP provides support to BPS to assist with employees having difficulty in the workplace. Through our grant, we will rebrand EAP to encourage its usage by destigmatizing as well as promoting it. We want to thank the district staff members who helped generate ideas for the grant, as well as directed us to info and resources. This grant is another example of the positive things that BFT and the district can do when we work together. I'll keep you guys apprised of the progress of the grant, and I look forward to collaborating with the district in order to solve pressing and important challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colucci. Mr. Levine?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent. Mark Levine, Levine and Stivers from Tallahassee.
Mr. Levine, if you could just get a little closer to that mic for me, sir. Either one of them. Yeah, just pick
Okay.
one.
Little
Thank
close.
you.
Does that do it?
Perfect.
On behalf of Ms. Enright and the Brevard Federation of Teachers, the situation I think all of you are somewhat familiar with, probably not as familiar as I and some of your staff members. There's a great injustice in what the superintendent is requesting you do. And I don't believe that Dr. Mullins is doing it because he's mean or anything of that nature. I think he feels like it's his duty. There is a pending bill in the legislature to correct this problem as it relates to employees. Unfortunately, if that does pass our legislature, and who the heck knows about that, it's not going to help Ms. Enright if you proceed with her termination tonight. I've had serious issues with the medical review officer. The medical review officer is insisting that Ms. Enright produce a, quote, prescription to him so that he can then report this as a negative finding. Florida does not have a, quote, prescription in the sense of you go to your doctor and get a prescription for an antibiotic and take it to the pharmacy and fill it. That's a safeguard issue. It's all done electronically. I have a conference call tomorrow with the director of the medical marijuana division of the Department of Health, who, according to his legal counsel, is going to tell me that he is prepared to come and testify that, in fact, the electronic system is a prescription. You can do something tonight, though, that will obviate the necessity for any further involvement by us, by you, by BFT, by Ms. Enright. The situation is that you have a recommendation from your superintendent. You do not have sworn documents. You do not have testimony. You do not, all you have is an allegation. Tonight, what you can do is you can deny the superintendent's recommendation. You don't even have to discuss it. You don't even have to debate it. If you deny that recommendation, the matter becomes moot and it goes away. You can do that without us getting into hearings and things of that nature. It is the right thing to do for one of your outstanding educators. It is the right thing for you. Are a constitutional body. You have the authority to do these things. And you know, I don't say that lightly because I've appeared in front of you guys a lot. But it is true, you have the ability to do that. So when you get to F16, somebody just makes the motion to deny the superintendent's recommendation. It's a done deal, and it all goes away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Levine. As Mr. Savage is approaching, our next three speakers will be Vanessa Skipper, Allison Enright, and Dan Bennett.
Ms. Belford, members of the board, Dr. Mullins, thank you for the time. We just come here today to stand up for a great teacher. At the end of the day, Ms. Enright is an amazing teacher. If you ask her administrator that, they will tell her that. If you ask her coworkers, they will tell you she's an amazing teacher. If you ask her students, they will tell her that she's an amazing teacher. Now, I understand this is a hot topic. I understand you have a policy. And I know every single one of you to be good people. And I don't say that easily to people. However, at the end of the day, it is your choice. You're determining to terminate a teacher or not. We ask that you do not terminate a teacher because she is a great teacher. We understand that there's a policy involved, but at the end of the day, she had a prescription. She followed everything she was supposed to do in the state of Florida. You guys are employers in the state of Florida. Secondly, I would just ask that you consider all options. Your policy has not been updated since 2002 on a drug-free workplace. A lot has changed in the world since 2002. So we thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Savage. Ms. Skipper?
Good evening, Vanessa Skipper, Vice President of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. I stand before you tonight in support of retaining an excellent teacher, Miss Allison Enright. What led to tonight? Miss Enright is a victim of an insubordinate student. While during her part as a faculty member at Space Coast Junior Senior High, she directed students to follow the set COVID-19 protocol traffic patterns of the stairway. Instead of complying, a student shoved into Miss Enright, causing her to fall backward and up the stairs. Miss Enright never once tried to hide the medication she was legally prescribed. She did what everyone has to do and should do. She disclosed her legally prescribed medications when she was sent for a workman's comp drug test. She had no idea how her life would so suddenly change. I also would like to note that even in the face of termination, she still chose not to press battery charges against the student. It is unconscionable that the policy in question tonight has not been clarified in almost 2 decades. It has not kept up with the legislation or the times. And whether it was clarified in favor of the use or against the use of medical marijuana, the fact remains that no one bothered to make sure a clear message, as is stipulated in the policy itself, was given to the instructional staff of Brevard Public Schools about legalization of medical marijuana and whether or not they could use it. The argument is the potential loss of federal funds. Speaking of federal funds, it's puzzling to me that students can actually take medical marijuana on campus according to the student use of medication policy. This policy was also almost 2 decades old, adopted on the same day as the employee policy in 2002, but was updated in September of 2019 with 2 key pieces: a reference to the medical marijuana amendment to the Florida Constitution and an escape clause that basically says, if the federal government says that the district's funds are jeopardized by this policy, then the policy is suspended. By clarifying this policy to be current with time, students who are prescribed medical marijuana are clear about expectations. Before you terminate an outstanding employee, can you in good conscience say the policy is clear and employees understand the expectations given the changes in the law? As a constitutional body, you can decide if taking the extreme action of firing Miss Enright tonight is the moral action to take. This is not the case of someone illegally using drugs. It is not the case of someone being under the influence and putting students in danger. This is the case of an amazingly needed intensive reading teacher taking a legally prescribed medication. When other remedies are available, is termination the extreme the district should choose? Please do not terminate Miss Allison Enright. Send her back where she belongs, making a difference in the lives of our students at Space Coast Junior Senior High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skipper. Ms. Enright?
Good evening. My name is Allison Enright, and I'm the educator on the agenda for the superintendent's recommendation for termination. I stand here before you today because of medical marijuana, and I'm not referring to the reason we are at this meeting. I mean, I stand here without assistive devices because of medical marijuana. You see, since 2002, I have presented with several conditions that cause both severe pain and weakness. Over several years, I was prescribed multiple opioid medications and required leg braces, forearm crutches, and a motorized wheelchair. Eventually, I was told I would never walk or work again. When we moved to Florida, through much work, I was able to return to teaching. But then in 2016, I sustained an injury on the job that exacerbated my previous conditions. I was sent to a workers' comp doctor who prescribed additional opioids. I continued to digress and feared that I would be back in the wheelchair. Finally, in 2017, I consulted with a district-appointed workers' compensation doctor who advised me on the procedures for replacing the opioids with medical marijuana. In July of 2018, I applied for and obtained my medical marijuana card and am now completely healthy. I not only walk, but run and work out. Rather than functioning, I'm living life to the fullest and am better able to meet the needs of my students. I've earned the rating of a highly effective teacher for the past 4 years. Unfortunately, 2 months ago, while on my way to cover for another teacher, I attempted to redirect some students and was pushed down on the stairs. I reported the incident and was instructed to file a workers' compensation claim. At that time, I disclosed that I have a medical marijuana card and would test positive for THC in my system. That is what brings me before you this evening. I want to make it clear, I do not do drugs. I don't smoke pot. I don't get high. I take 2 pills per day, one in the morning and one at bedtime. I do not have any psychotropic effect from it. Medical marijuana is my medication. It is prescribed by a board-certified medical doctor whom I see for prescription refills. It replaces the myriad of opiates that I had been prescribed. It has far fewer side effects than opioids, and I'm far healthier than I've been since I've been taking it. It has given me back my energy, my personality, and my enthusiasm for life, which in turn makes me a better teacher. I love teaching. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. I've been at a loss these past few months without my students and my colleagues. Space Coast Junior Senior High School is my home, and I want to go back. You have the ability to make that happen. Please, let me go back home.
Thank you, Ms. Enright. Mr. Bennett?
Good evening, members of the board. Good evening, Dr. Mullins. I don't know what I could say to follow that, but I'll certainly try. I used to be Dan Bennett, officer of the Brevard Federation of Teachers. Now I'm Dan Bennett, happy teacher at Space Coast. I teach math, I teach ESE. I push in, I have classes of my own, e-learning. I really like teaching. It's so much better than those days working at the union because it was all arguing with some of the people in front of me. But I want to, some of you are new, so I want to tell you about some past history. It's not only you that are new, but there's a lot of people in this building that are new. And 3 summers ago when I left, coming up on 3 summers, there was a different associate superintendent of HR, there was a different chief negotiator, different investigators in this building, and the conversation came up. It turned out just to be rhetoric, but I said, what would happen if a teacher tested positive when they were taking it for medical purposes? And I was told by associate superintendent said, the policy is the policy. If you're taking illegal substances, you will be terminated. If you are impaired at work, you will be terminated. And I had no argument for that. That was fine. I actually had 2 teachers that were putting me up to asking, and I pushed it a little further. I said, now you realize the Constitution has changed with that amendment, and you realize that for medical purposes, it's no longer illegal. So your policy says illegal substances. For medical purposes, it's not illegal. So without changing your policy, all you really need to do is just change your practice. Just bring your practice in line with your policy. And I was told again, if someone tests positive, they will be terminated. And I was pushing a little further because I actually had 2 teachers that were putting me up to asking, but both of those teachers were on the way out. One resigned, one retired. And so when I was asked the question, Dan, do you actually have a case now, or are we just doing this exercise for, and no, I didn't have a case. And they said, well, let us know when you have a case. Well, here we are, we have a case. And what we're asking is that we don't need a change in policy. We need a change in practice. Because I'll tell you, I don't have evidence, I'm not naming names, I'm not here to do that, but Ms. Enright is not the only teacher in the county that's wondering right now what happens. She's not the only teacher that's seeing the practice changed for students because of the change in Constitution. There are a lot of employees that are wondering what's going to happen right now because they go to a doctor paid for by the BPS health plan, and they use dollars that are put on a medical savings card that is filtered through BPS payroll. And they do what they need to do under doctor's care that's being paid for by the district. And now they find out, are we going to be fired? I left the classroom about 13 years ago to serve with BFT because I saw this as a district impervious to fixing mistakes. I saw this as a district that would power through bad decisions. I used to say that this was a district that would lawyer up on the dictionary before fixing a typo. You have a chance to do the right thing without powering through a mistake. Please do the right thing this evening. Give us back our colleague. Give us back our teacher.
Bennett.
Thank you all.
All right, just for clarification, for those of you who are still on the speaker list, we're going to move to our business meeting, take care of our business meeting, and then we will come back to the remainder of the speaker list. We don't have a ton on the agenda, so it shouldn't be a long wait. Ms. Skipper. Thank you, Ms. Skipper. I have Ms. Weeks, and what was the other one? Got it. All right, I apologize, Dr. Baldridge, if you would like to approach, and then Ms. Weeks, you can follow. Sorry, didn't mean to. I was looking down, I didn't see you were on your way. Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay, so everybody's talked about what an excellent teacher she is by her ratings. I am Jocelyn Baldridge. I am the literacy coach at Space Coast Junior Senior High. I want to tell you that she's one of our best teachers in this district. And I don't say that lightly. I have worked in schools across the county, across the district, and across the state as a literacy professional. With expertise, I can tell you that Ms. Enright is a high-impact teacher who makes a difference with every student that she teaches. It's easy to work with AP and advanced kids. Those kids want to learn, and they have parents that'll make them learn. But it takes a highly skilled, caring educator to be able to move our striving readers. On top of that, a high percentage of Ms. Enright's students have learning disabilities and other exceptionalities. She works first to create relationships and give the students a sense of belonging. Then she meets them where they are academically. Her experience prior as an ESE director and her tenacity to make all students learn have supported excellence in our school. When I first came to Space Coast, I checked all the teachers' data, and she was on top as far as learning gains and moving her students. Students who take her class often do not need another language ILA class. Not only does she give them a sense of belonging, but she stays on top of their learning. If they fall behind, she's in constant contact with students and their parents and guardians. One parent whose student was in her class last year was very happy to know that she'd have him again this year because he'd made so many gains. But now that parent is very frustrated because his teacher has been out of the classroom. When you walk into Miss Enright's classroom, it's a journey of caring and kindness. She greets all of her students at the door and says hello to them by name. Prior to COVID-19, students also had a secret handshake that they would do with her before they entered the classroom. There is calming music playing and a welcoming environment. The most behavior and academically challenged students settle down to read and to learn. With the start of the new school year, she wasn't worried about her life and her health. She was worried that her online learners would not learn as well as her face-to-face students. She has not previously been a technology person, and she wanted to make sure all her students receive quality instruction. So she spent countless hours outside of her regular school day learning Zoom and Google Classroom and other technological ins and outs. She mastered all of these skills, and her first-term students did not suffer. But her current students are suffering. They are lacking the consistency and expertise of a daily dose of Miss Enright. They ask when their teacher will be back. The teacher that was there for them no matter what. The teacher who cares about them and checked up on them. The one who made striving, exceptional education students feel that they belonged and gave them a sense of self-efficacy. Those students need their teacher back, and the district needs to keep our master teacher. Dr. Mullins, you used to yell at me when I'd come and talk to Tony May Lopez and say, don't steal my teacher. This teacher is every bit as good as that, and we need to keep her in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baldridge. Ms. Weeks?
Well, I wish I would have went first. No, I'm kidding. She said everything I really wanted to talk about was building the relationships. And as I look behind you and I read your mission to serve every student with excellence as a standard is exactly what she does. This job is a passion of mine. I can't imagine doing anything else now. Building these relationships with these students and these parents. Everyone has a story. All of us do. And until we get to know that story and understand where these students are coming from and what is driving them, and to focus on their strengths and not their weaknesses is what we need in these buildings. And that is what Ms. Enright does. But as we stand here and talk about an amazing teacher, I want us to talk about a person. I want you to think of her as if she was your mother, your sister, someone that you love dearly and know how hard this is. This woman used to be in a wheelchair. She does anything and everything for her students. She works late in the evenings, and not just building relationships with the students, with the guardians. We have a lot of our students being raised by grandparents that don't know what questions to even ask. She's giving them the answers before they even ask the questions. She's seeing where there is lacking. And to me, as a parent of two students that came out of BPS schools, I'm very proud to say that both of them graduated with their bachelor's at 19 and 20. My daughter already has her master's degree at 23. I know how great BPS is. I am honored that my children went there, and I'm honored that I work and serve your students. And I ask today that we serve our educators that do so much for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Weeks. All right, that is going to move us into the consent agenda. Dr. Mullins.
There are 21 agenda items under this category.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Does any board member wish to pull any item from the consent agenda?
I do.
Ms. Jenkins?
I would like to pull F16, please.
All right, F16. Any board member wish to pull any additional items on the agenda? All right, I will then entertain a motion to accept the consent items with the exception of item F16.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Campbell, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote.
Hang on a second. There we go again. Sorry, Ms. Keep doing this.
That's okay. The motion passes 5-0. All right, Ms. Jenkins, you pulled item F16 from the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Open for discussion. Ms. Jenkins, since you pulled, do you want to take discussion on that first?
Yeah, sure. So forgive me, I have a lot that I kind of want to talk about on this, so I'm going to do my best not to go way out of order and jumble here. But when this was first brought up to my attention and had a meeting to kind of understand what was going on and ask whatever questions I wanted to ask, there were a couple of things that didn't really sit right with me and that I just wanted to discuss as a board. So first and foremost, I wholeheartedly understand that we get some of our funding federally, some of our grants are federally funded, and the federal government doesn't recognize medical marijuana as being a legal substance. However, when we look at that drug-free workplace policy, it doesn't explicitly state medical marijuana. We also, again, as some of the speakers had mentioned, we do have a student policy. So then I asked the question, does that student policy then put us in non-compliance with those federal regulations? And the answer was, well, technically, yes. So I feel like there's kind of a double standard there. If we're going to allow it for students, but we're not going to allow it for teachers, and the reason is because of the funding issue, that one doesn't really stand up for me. Another problem that I have is, as one of the people on this board who has worked for BPS the longest, I went through the same orientation as Ms. Enright year after year. And you go into Progo, you go through your orientation modules, they're pretty much the same every single year, and there is a drug-free workplace module. But then in order to see the specific language where it states illegal substances, that's a separate link you need to click on. And again, it doesn't clearly state medicinal marijuana in there. And again, as the speakers had said, if I'm somebody who goes to a doctor and I'm being told it's not called a prescription, but if I'm just an average person, I'm going to the doctor is approving me to get medicinal marijuana, I'm going to assume that is a prescription. I go to a dispensary to go get that drug. They have to look in a system to look up the doctor's orders, the kind I can take, the level I'm allowed to take. Then they slap on a sticker on whatever I'm getting. as an average person, I'm going to go ahead and assume that because I went through that process, that is a prescription and that no longer qualifies as an illegal substance. And so I say all of that because as a board, I'm not sitting here arguing that we should allow it, shouldn't allow it. What I am arguing is that the language is unclear. And if we're going to be really adamant about it, we really should be paying attention to that language and maybe in 2021 explicitly state including medicinal marijuana so that there is no gray area there and we are educating our staff members clearly on what those requirements are. Again, as the speaker said, the teacher said herself, she willingly went for this test. She disclosed it for the test. This is an excellent teacher who was placed in harm by doing what she was supposed to do. It seems extreme to me to head towards termination. So the other issue that I have with this is the only option isn't just termination. There is literally option A, B, C, and D. So there can be a consequence if you want to be really hard on that drug-free policy, drug-free workplace policy, but termination doesn't have to be the answer. And I just feel like that's a really extreme answer. And when I'm told that she's terminated and in 1 year she's allowed to reapply, I said, where is that stated? Why is that a rule? Can you point that out for me? The language actually said job applicants who fail their initial drug test can only apply in 1 year. Again, that's another area that I say, red flag, that says job applicant. That's not talking about our current employees. Again, if we want that to be the rule in the policy, we need to clean that language up. Our students are sitting in a class with a substitute right now. We're not doing them any service. Terminating this teacher is basically going to guarantee them a substitute for an additional year, or the new students that come in for the new school year. I just don't think that's what's best for the kids. I also did ask a question too initially of, do we have any information of levels of THC? You know, do we have a way of telling whether or not somebody was under the influence of this drug? And the response was no. And so, again, that didn't sit right with me. I have no knowledge of whether or not this teacher was under the influence when they came to work. And the last thing that, again, I apologize if I'm going in circles here, but the one thing that really, really didn't sit well with me was the concern of setting a precedence. It bothers me. It's 2021. It's allowed in our state. I get the federal law, the federal grants, but there shouldn't be a fear of precedence here. And if that is our fear, then let's take the opportunity to clean up all of that language that I just identified. Once you clean it up, that precedence no longer sits. You point to that language, you said it clearly, explicitly states medical marijuana, and there's no such thing anymore. So, I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there to my fellow board members because I don't know what conversations you guys were having and what questions you've asked and the answers that you had gotten. But I think that termination is extreme, and there's another way that if you want to comply with that drug-free workplace, it could be done totally differently.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Any other board member wish to discuss? Ms. Campbell?
So I just to remind the board of, because that student policy was brought up a couple of times, just remind the board and the students who were on the board at the time when we adopted that policy. There was a lot of conversation among the board about why and how and all of that. And you know, I don't actually believe that we would have changed that student drug policy if the Department of Education hadn't come down after the amendment and said, school boards across Florida, thou shalt develop a student medical marijuana use policy. And in the process of developing that policy, there are certain things that stand out to my memory. One is that that policy is so very descriptive. It's probably one of the very most specific and descriptive policies that we have, that for the main reason of making sure that none of our employees ever even come into contact with it. That, you know, parents have to go through the whole process. It has to be the certain parent. They have to have the card. It has to be the guardian on the card. They have to bring the drug to the school at a specific time and give it to the student themselves in a specific place, and then they take it back home with them, so it's never left with any of our employees. And so it was very specific, and we do have the escape clause because we recognize that there's a potential for, you know, the federal government to come and say, you know, you can't have this in your schools because it's still, you know, federally an illegal drug. So we have that, as Ms. Skipper said, escape clause. I think I've called it that to her myself. But when the other thing that stands out from that conversation is our general counsel at the time, we had the question about employees. Does this change anything for our employees? Because according to the Florida Constitution now, medical marijuana is allowed, not as a prescription, that word's been used several times, but as a, I can't remember what the term they use because it's not governed by the FDA. But, and she said, nothing in the amendment keeps an employer from having a drug-free workplace policy. And so even though we can allow it for our students, there's nothing in the amendment, in the Constitution, in Florida law that says that any employer, not just school districts that have, receive federal funds, but any employer can have a a drug-free workplace policy. So I want to clear that about the student policy because it's been tossed around that we're being inconsistent. And the other thing I would say is that our students, it's a different level when you're talking about the use of marijuana, medical or otherwise, for our employees who, whether they're in the classroom or they're driving our buses or they're back in a cubicle here at ESF, at some point in time and in some way, shape, or form are all responsible in some way for the safety of our students. And I'll be honest, as a board, opening this gray area, it is very tricky for us to start distinguishing between these employees can and these employees can't. That was offered up as maybe you can have a policy allowing employees to use medical marijuana, but there are certain groups of employees, someone mentioned bus drivers and people who use heavy equipment, who wouldn't be allowed. So then we as a board are trying to decide who can and who can't, and what dosage is too much, and that depends on your body weight. So if you weigh this much, you can take this much. I mean, we're talking about getting in way deep in the weeds of things where we don't belong. And it is, to be completely honest, the most heartbreaking thing for me about this decision is that there is a person who, Miss Enright, or any other employee who's going to have to choose between a medical treatment that has radically changed her life or the job that she loves. Because even if we terminate and she decides, she has the opportunity to come back in a year, at that point she'll have to clear a drug screen. And so she'll have to make that choice. And that's gut-wrenching to me. But I still believe that we as a district, not just because of federal fundings, but because of our responsibility for the 70,000 students that we are responsible for, that we're trying to serve with excellence as the standard, have to have that standard. And so when we start talking about levels, what levels are too many levels, are too much or enough, I just don't think that we belong there. And and even if we clean up the language, it doesn't change the policy. So I do agree that that professional development that's offered at the beginning of the year, I think would be very helpful to have those 3 little words, including medical marijuana, right there front page, so there's no doubt in anyone's mind, rather than having to go through and find them. But they're there clearly, and it doesn't say medical marijuana; it just says marijuana. And so, in all its shapes and forms. So those that are, I guess that's my thoughts on that. But I just think we need to stay out of a great, you say it wouldn't set a precedent, but it absolutely would, because we wouldn't really be changing our policy. We'd just be moving the wording around.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Ms. McDougall, would you like to speak?
Can I ask a follow-up question before we kind of jump off of that to Mr. Gibbs?
Sure.
So, Mr. Gibbs, I know I asked this question when we were in the meeting, and I'm going to try to remember the way I asked the question, of course. But I did ask you something along the line of, if we are concerned about losing federal funds, can the argument be made that our student policy then would stop us from having federal funding? And at the time, you said, yes, someone can make that argument.
You can certainly argue that it would be there. I don't know that the federal government would say we're violating it. We still have a no marijuana policy. We are not administering marijuana. So if it came down to that, a parent actually or a caregiver has to come to our school, get their child or the student that they're a guardian of, and administer the drug. So I think there's a pretty good distinction there. And you can argue to the federal government, if they tried to yank your funding, that we aren't administering anything. Florida law says parents have a right to give this to their child, and they're giving it to their child. Can they yank it? Yes. Can they yank it for a school district that allows the use of marijuana? Yes. Has anybody done it? Not that I'm aware of. Do you have to check a box on every grant that you get that says you are a drug-free workplace? Yes. Can you, if it comes to me and they say, and we're allowing the use of medical marijuana and staff says, can I check that box? No, I'm going to say not if you're going to be legal under federal law, because federal law does not recognize
Right.
medical marijuana,
So
period.
I don't even want to go down that avenue because I actually want to just say something off of what Ms. Campbell said. This is not about allowing the use of medical marijuana. That's not what this conversation is about. That's not what I'm proposing. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is there's nothing in our policy that explicitly states that we must terminate this teacher. There are other options for this teacher. There can be other consequences for using an illegal substance. It's not saying that medical marijuana is allowed. And when I'm talking about changing the language, it's not to allow medical marijuana. It's so that that precedence doesn't exist anymore. Because if you're clearly stating it after this incident, then no one can make that argument anymore that we didn't know that that was an illegal substance. And so going down the avenue of saying, you know, they're responsible for the safety of our students. I mean, I could make a million arguments about people that are using opioid drugs and painkillers when they're coming to work and all of that. I mean, it's just.
Ms. Jenkins, if I can interrupt you for just a second, because what I want to try to get us away from, I let you in front of Ms. McDougall to ask a question for Mr. Gibbs, not to argue the issues among the board members, especially when we haven't heard from all of the board members at this point. So
I understand.
Is it okay if I come back to you?
And I just want to say, I'm not trying to argue here. I just want to make it clear. I am not proposing that we allow medical marijuana. I'm literally just saying this is not the only option of a discipline for this teacher. Termination is not the only option.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. McDougall?
I think we can all agree that this is a very unfortunate incident that happened. And the events that happened, I feel for this teacher. It is unfortunate, but this is a Schedule I drug. I do not necessarily agree that it should be, but I don't make that law. And a Schedule I drug, and many of you probably already know this, heroin's in there, LSD, marijuana, ecstasy, TCP, PCP. Do I think it should be there? No, but I didn't put it there. And we are a drug-free workplace. And that's what I have to base my decision on at this point. Is this a hard decision? Absolutely. I'm hearing this is a fabulous teacher. And at this point, again, I can't tell you how unfortunate this is. The events that happened, I wish we could turn back the clock. But unfortunately, we can't. I would hate to lose her, but again, I feel like I'm bound to follow. When somebody said we have a constitutional duty, yeah, part of it is we swear to uphold the Constitution, and part of that Constitution is to follow federal law, right or wrong, whether we agree with this law or not. That's our duty at this point. So I wish it wasn't a Schedule I drug. I also am concerned when we talk about different drugs and levels. It would be great if there was a test that could say this was a medicinal level and this was a level that was abuse. We don't have that yet. I wish we did, because it would make my decision a little bit easier. But anyhow, I just wanted to put that out there that I still feel this is a Schedule I drug. We're a drug-free workplace, and I want to uphold that drug-free workplace at this point. Students and teachers are different. So.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Susan?
So I did a lot of research on this. There's a philosophical debate over the role of the board, right? Like, what is our role? There's 2,000 bills right now filed in the Florida legislature to either create new laws or correct old ones. And we, as a school district, under my understanding, are a governing body that oversees the rules of policies and abides by federal and state laws. But I truly believe that for us to sit back and look at a situation and feel like we are handcuffed, I don't agree. I don't agree that we are handcuffed to the federal government. I don't agree that we are handcuffed to the state government. I believe that what we do in Brevard to follow federal and state laws, but that we have the opportunity within us to make changes. I have a problem when we just automatically say, well, that's the way it is, so that's the way it's got to be. If that was the case, we would never need to amend policies or create laws. So I wanted to look at this. So a lot of the pieces, the bill in the legislature, I looked at, it's got 5 committees, it hasn't even been heard, okay? It's just the way it is. It's just not going to come up. I looked at both sides, it's just not going to be there. It's filed, it's a great idea, it's specifically what Mr. Levine looked at. When you look at the prescriptions versus the medically versus not medically, and are they, the technical term for a prescription that comes from a doctor comes from the doctor to the patient. It's called a prescription, right? The term that you were looking for is called medically necessary recommendation. That's the term given to the prescription for an individual that is taking medical marijuana at the time. So when they go to the doctor, which is a literal doctor, who then has to actually take extra training to get to the certification of dispensement, it is then considered a medically necessary recommendation. And so that piece right there is, I think, where we all struggle. Is it a prescription? Isn't it a prescription, right? So I went and I looked at federal class 1 drugs and everything else. And it's kind of funny because I looked at that, and I don't know how many of you have gone to work. I had medical prescription to take hydrocodone while I was teaching, right? I mean, I did, Space Coast. Broke 2 ribs coaching wrestling. I broke 2 ribs doing a cradle, all right? And then I literally came back the next day and was taking hydrocodone so that I could teach and be there, but that was legal. So there's that piece which is wrapped around. You have the assumption of, there's 2 pieces. There's the assumption of the teacher and the lack of the will for the district. And let me explain that. There is no way that this lady took medical marijuana with the intent that she was going to subvert the school district on a drug policy. In her mind, she got herself better off of some drugs to become better with medical marijuana and got a prescription and thought that. I truly believe that. I truly believe that she did that. And we as a district have failed, in my mind, to update our policies to get to a point where we can deal with this, right? But that's okay, because we know that instances like this are what define change. So every bill that you go up into Tallahassee or around here in our policies half the time, there's something that happens that makes you create the change that then improves the system. So the process that we're looking here is, in my mind, is not one that we say that this is the federal government, the state government, and this is just what we do. So I started looking even further into, I called the dispensaries. I asked 3 different dispensaries in the last 48 hours. I said, can you explain to me, I mean, we have federal workplace out at the federal government. Can you explain to me, like, you guys are dispensing these things, what do you tell your people? And all 3 of those doctors that were there were telling me, they said, we tell the people, a drug-free workplace means that if you get hit, that you're going to, they're going to fire you. And that is legal, and that was the 3 dispensaries. So I'm looking at all of the variances. I'm looking at the dispensaries and what they're saying, the variances between the prescriptions and this term that they're using to get around it. I'm looking at us making our recommendations. And I came down to this. I don't think that we have to, tonight, terminate this teacher. I feel that tonight we have the opportunity to improve us as a district. And let me explain. I believe that we don't terminate this teacher. I believe we've been given an opportunity to change the rules and laws, to ask for guidance, and then to rule based on guidance from the individuals who wrote these laws. So my instance that I would say is, in the event that the individuals that are here are not willing to cross the line to exonerate this teacher, what I would ask is that we petition the Attorney General in the state of Florida or federally for an opinion. because we are in between two governing entities trying to make a decision with an outdated policy and a staff that, I'm telling you right now, Dr. Mullins does not take this lightly. He loves our teachers. He's not out here to fire teachers. We're all in this together. And I truly believe that we should make a motion to move this to the Attorney General for a recommendation, keep our teacher paid, on leave, or put back in the classroom, and then create a series of workshops to get into this law, to possibly update our policies. And once the recommendation comes back from the Attorney General, we will have our opportunity to be a better school district. I truly, truly believe that we can get there. And there will be times when I will tell you that the teacher needs to be terminated or not terminated. This is the first time that I've sat and we are trying to define laws as individuals inside this school district to create policies. I think we're off. So I've made a motion that I would like to move it to the Attorney General for an opinion. Is there anybody in here that will give me a second?
Hearing no second, Mr. Susan, that motion fails.
Thank you.
Okay. So oftentimes I reference, way back when things happened in the district. But I think because it was mentioned, and Ms. Campbell, you touched on it to some extent, when medical marijuana was made legal in the state of Florida, the Department of Education issued guidance that we must adopt a policy to allow student use of medical marijuana. There was no direction from the DOE or the state to alter our policy for drug-free workplace, which there still has not been. In fact, the Constitution, the amendment on the Constitution says that we do not have to change our drug-free workplace in response to the legalization of medical marijuana in the state of Florida. And in so much as Neola, who I know the board members are familiar with Neola, but for our public, Neola at the time when we were working on drafting that student policy at the direction of the state actually refused to provide a policy template on that issue because they said that they could not in good conscience direct our district to break federal law. And so they refused to put together a template on student use of medical marijuana. And so Ms. Enval at the time worked with attorneys throughout the state to draft that policy that was required by the state of Florida for student use of medical marijuana. And I think that's an important differentiation. I also have done a significant amount of research into this issue, had the opportunity through our Central Florida School Boards Coalition to hear from attorneys outside of our district as well. Not that I question your guidance, Mr. Gibbs, but I think it's always good to have another voice that reinforces what we're hearing. And the exact same guidance that Mr. Gibbs has given us throughout this process is the guidance that came from the attorney who did the coalition meeting for us last month. I think another important point is when not only, Mr. Susan, do the dispensaries notify people when they get their medical marijuana, but in order to receive a medical marijuana recommendation, all patients must sign a document stating that they understand that medical marijuana is illegal at the federal level. And so I absolutely do not think that we have a situation where a teacher has intentionally defied the district. As was stated by several people, this is an incredibly unfortunate situation. And, I am all in favor of clarification going forward, as you mentioned, Ms. Jenkins. What I struggle with is your recommendation that there are opportunities for alternatives, because the alternatives in the policy don't provide an opportunity for someone to continue to utilize medical marijuana. So we can provide an opportunity for someone in some instances to go into a treatment program and cease the use of medical marijuana. but we don't have an alternative that allows continued use of medical marijuana by an employee. And there are some other pieces too. It was mentioned that the care is being paid for through our health insurance. Our health insurance will not pay for medical marijuana. In fact, the workers' compensation claim wasn't paid for this individual because it's not allowed, because it's illegal. If it were a legal substance, we would not have even been notified that there was a positive drug test on this individual. And so, I am no happier about this than anyone else. But as Mr. Susan said, we take an oath to uphold the laws of the state of Florida and the United States. And until this gets fixed at the federal level, and quite frankly, I hope it does, because if you can get so much relief from something, kudos to you for the progress that you've made and the work that you've put in to get there. But we're caught in a catch-22, and there are so many consequences for us to go against that recognition of marijuana as an illegal substance at the federal level still. And I wish it weren't the case, but even if the bill passes, which I agree with you, Mr. Susan, it's not going anywhere. And I'm really not sure that they even have the power to pass a bill in the state of Florida that would make it okay for us to violate federal law, but that's a whole nother, we don't have to go down that wormhole. But even if it does pass, and even if the policy changes, the policy and the expectations that were in place at the time, as unfortunate as the situation is, are the ones that have to be looked at. And so I don't feel good about it. But I will be upholding the recommendation of the superintendent this evening.
Can I follow you?
Can I say something? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah.
Susan, I just heard.
Mr. Susan and then Ms. Jenkins.
So I go back to, I agree with you. Everything that you said, Ms. Belford, is 100% right. Our current policies, the state laws, the federal government, right? We got that. That is what we are in right now. And that's why we are where we are. Workers' compensation won't pay the claim. Absolutely. Healthcare won't pay for medical marijuana. Absolutely. Variance in the prescription drug and the other side. Absolutely. But this is one of our people. This is one of our people. And if we are going to support one of our people, then I say we petition to try to make that change that we're sitting under. We're all sitting here saying, everybody here is saying, even Dr. Mullins, Dr. Fetty will tell you, this really sucks because it's the current law. Well, there's only two ways to go and change law. Through the federal court system, through requesting a recommendation from the Attorney General, or through a bill. And we can't file a bill. So the only way we can support our people is to say that this is wrong and go to try to find an avenue to make it right. If you guys fully don't support it because under the current policy, I believe you. But we got to show our people that we can fight for them. We got to show for our people that, yeah, this sucks. Sorry, you made a decision that you thought was right or whatever it is, and, the current policy, you change laws for a reason. You petition the government to change those, and that's where my mind's at. I'll make another motion to not uphold the superintendent's recommendation, but try to find another avenue to petition the government for a redress, to give us guidance as to this situation. Give them the opportunity through this to change what we're dealing with. If we give them that softball, they will then take it and run with it. They will tell us, no, you guys are horrible. You've done, this isn't what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to fire the teacher, everything else. If they tell you, if they take it, they might turn around and say, you know what, you're right. This is a complete mess. We're going to review it. And then we're champions for our people. But if we don't do that, then we're sitting back and allowing this to happen. And I can't, knowing that I've got to fight for that person, I can't support the superintendent's recommendation for this. I can't do it because I believe there's another path. Not that the superintendent's wrong on the recommendation, but just at the path that we need to do. So I'm done. Sorry, so there's a motion on the table. Do I get a second? Jenkins got a second?
I'm going to second you on that, but I just
Oh,
want
thank
to,
God, we got more discussion.
Hold on one second, just because I want to make sure that everything was recorded since we had some background noise. So I have a motion by Mr. Susan and a second by Ms. Jenkins, which opens that item for discussion.
I want to say something though. So I feel like we were having two different conversations tonight about something that was strictly about terminating a teacher for the use of medical marijuana. So again, we're not talking about policy, whether or not it's legal or not legal. We're talking about terminating this teacher for violating that policy. And my argument is there are other options other than termination. And we also, there was a statement made that even if we did something else for this teacher, then she would have to stop using it. Well, that's not our choice, right? We have to give that teacher the opportunity to make that decision whether or not she wants to stop using it. We can't just assume she's not going to want to stop using it. So I don't think that that is justification for not going down a different avenue. I would like to ask Dr. Thetty if she's here tonight still. I don't know if she's in the back room. Oh, there you go. Hi. Dr. Thetty, there was a document that you showed me, and it might be the drug-free workplace document. I'm sorry. But the document that had options A, B, C, and D clearly listed, and I believe A was termination option. And then there was one option that Ms. Belford mentioned about, rehab facility, because we're talking about addictive substances. I just want to reference that, if you can kind of pull that up or read it to us.
It's
Because
the drug-free workplace technical guide
Thank
you're
you.
referring to.
And because this is what I'm harping on, because we're only talking about the termination of this teacher based on the fact that the policy was violated. We're not talking about changing the policy right now. I just feel like termination, again, is the most extreme choice, and that doesn't seem to make sense for me when there's other options.
Can I ask for a point of consideration that we had a motion on the table to discuss the motion?
Right.
And then she's going to a different area. If we can just discuss that, unless she wants to add that to the motion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted
to
to just bring it back to exactly what that conversation was. I didn't mean to take away from what you were bringing up.
No, but I did want to say, unless that's part of it, then we can stick there and then we can come out. Nothing against that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to stay inside that motion.
Yeah.
Because that way we're in there. So if you want to add what you're saying to part of the recommendation, which is that we move towards a group in the past, I'd love that. We move towards a policy like that.
So I have a motion on the floor. For clarification, the motion on the floor was to postpone a decision on the recommendation and seek guidance from the United States Attorney General?
No, the State Attorney General would be the proper process to do here.
State Attorney General. I have a second on that motion. Is there any additional discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Ms. Escobar, you need a voice vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. And the motion fails 2-3. Okay. So we are back to the original motion, which was on the floor. Is there additional discussion on the motion to approve the recommendation?
Yeah, I would
Ms. Jenkins.
like Dr. Thetty to just go ahead and read those options for us for what could be discipline options for someone who violates the policy.
So it's on page 6 of our technical guide for drug-free workplace. Board employees, any board employee found to test positive for illegal drugs or abuse of legal drugs will immediately be subject to disciplinary procedures. Employees who test positive for illegal drugs and or abuse of legal drugs may be suspended from employment with or without pay, terminated from employment, required to submit to further testing or other administrative procedures necessary for the enforcement of the drug-free workplace policy. Any and all actions will be in accord with the controlling applicable statute. The board recognizes that chemical dependency is an illness that may be successfully treated. The board may choose to direct an employee to a rehab program.
And I just want to point out as well, in the beginning, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but in the beginning, the word may was explicitly written there because those are choices. So termination doesn't have to be the only choice for this teacher.
Can I follow?
Sir, Mr. Susan?
I'm sorry. Did you have something to say, Madam Chair? Oh.
No, I was just asking for additional discussion. So you're good. Go for it.
We're good? On the original offer?
Discussion on the original recommendation.
Okay.
The motion to approve the original recommendation, yeah?
I'd like to make a motion to give the teacher the opportunity to go into what I would call rehab as opposed to being terminated, but rehab not being coming off of a chemical dependency type thing, the way it's written, which is that's only half of what it is. Give her an opportunity in the process of what happened to find another path possibly, and in the process not terminate her. Does that make sense to you? So let me clarify. Right now, we have the opportunity to allow her to go to rehab, right? But we all know that we're not sending her to rehab because it was a situation where there was a major drug dependency that caused it. We're in a Pandora's box right now. So this motion allows her to go to rehab, but find another path to come off of what is going on that may be more amenable to our policies. That's my motion. Do I have a second?
Is there a second on Mr. Susan's motion?
I just want to clarify. I know what you mean. I know what you're getting at
I'm
when
giving
you
you the softball.
I know what you mean when you're saying the word rehab. I just want to clarify before I second anything.
I'm just going to interrupt for points of just to keep us all on track. So we have a motion on the floor. In order to discuss the motion on the floor, we need a second on that motion, which would open the motion for discussion. So I have a motion by Mr. Susan and a second by Ms. Jenkins.
Yeah.
Open the motion for discussion. Ms. Jenkins, the floor is yours.
Sure. So I know that you didn't mean this, Mr. Susan. I just want to make it really clear to the public. What you're trying to say is this person can now choose to rehab themselves off of this drug. We know that this isn't a dependency issue. This is not a person that's going to have to go into a rehab facility. So I just want to make that really clear.
Yep.
Can I ask Mr. Gibbs his opinion, though? So if that was the route that we were to go for the discipline for this teacher, does that still say that the district is following the drug-free workplace policy because there was a disciplinary action for this teacher?
Yes, I think it is an option listed in your board policy, which is drug-free workplace. So I think it's an option that you can go with. You would be setting a precedent for any other, like if you caught a teacher using heroin, the argument would be, well, now you have to let me go to a rehab program under the same terms and conditions that you allowed another employee to take.
I respect your legal opinion on that, but I find it difficult that that would hold up in a court of law where a teacher was using heroin and then they would sue the school district because we didn't give them an exact same option.
It wouldn't be a court of law. It would be your contract with your union. You would be setting disciplinary precedents to enforce the contract against your
I
employees.
would find it really hard to believe that our union would come to the defense of a teacher using heroin and it's just crazy.
Hang on. Ms. Belford.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Belford, can
hold on.
Mr. Gibbs finish what he was saying?
Hold on, Mr. Susan. Give me just a second, Mr. Susan.
I didn't, he was trying to explain it, and you got cut off.
Just a minute, Mr. Susan. So, Mr. Savage, while I appreciate your recognition of the motive of the union, just to keep decorum, I'm going to ask that we not have shouting from the audience, okay? Thank you, sir. Mr. Gibbs, if you would like to finish what you were saying.
I'm just saying, it doesn't have to do with the union defending. The union has a contractual obligation to represent their employees. It's not whether the union agrees with heroin use or not. They have an obligation to represent their employees to the best of their ability if they're a dues-paying member. So it's going to fall on them to hire legal counsel and represent that employee in a disciplinary action against them from the school district. That would be, for me, if I were representing that employee, I would come in here and say, your past practice is you allow illegal drug use to go to rehab and come back to work. Whether it's heroin or marijuana, it's all illegal drugs. That's what your policy says, illegal drug use, as read by Dr. Thetty. Marijuana is an illegal drug under federal law. So that's the precedent the district would be setting with that, and the union would likely argue that, and their legal counsel on behalf of their employees would argue that.
Can I ask a follow-up real quick? What is not an illegal drug to go to rehab? Like what?
Mr. Susan?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just trying to keep us all in order.
Yeah.
So Ms. Jenkins had the mic requesting Mr. Gibbs. So Ms. Jenkins, are you finished requesting Mr.
No,
Gibbs?
I just want to just say, I mean, there have been many instances where a teacher has done something wrong, where the union, yes, hires representation or comes to represent that person, but then follows the appropriate course for that teacher that did something wrong. And I get it, that's your role as our legal counsel, but oh man, I just don't think we can put that on the backs of a teacher that she has her colleagues sitting here saying how fantastic she is. I don't think that is her burden to bear. And it's just not right. It's just not fair. It's not the only option for this teacher.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Susan.
Mr. Gibbs, can you explain what drugs would be able to go to rehab. Because I don't know why you would go to rehab if you didn't have an illegal drug. You know what I mean?
You could
That's
be
all.
going, the policy, the way it's written, is abuse of legal drugs. So you could have a Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5 drug that you're abusing on the job and get sent to rehab. So it's not just illegal drugs. It would be any drug that you're abusing that you could send them to rehab. You're just opening that door that from now on, that's what the standard you're going to be held to. That's all. I just want you guys to understand the legal arguments that you may face in the future with the action you're considering.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Gibbs, and thank you so much for the consistent work that you do to try to keep us in that realm. I think part of this would be how that's narrow. That's kind of a broad stroke to a narrow argument, I feel. If we are making an argument that there is a variance after a superintendent has made the recommendation to fire, we have come forward and said as a board, we approve them, which is part of our policy to move forward from there, then every single other one of those, heroin, cocaine, whatever, would have to follow the same process, correct?
Right. If
Okay.
that's what
So we would
the
have still a
attorneys are gonna
final,
argue.
right, and then we would still be able to justify and say that due to the fact that there is no medically necessary recommendation for heroin, no medically, we can make that argument and split that hair on them. So I don't think that a wide brush of everybody's going to come in like we have zombies running around with heroin and cocaine and everything else out there going to come in and say, all of a sudden, we're caught and everything else. I don't think that's the case. I think that we are sufficient inside of that window. That's all. Thank you. Just wanted to make a statement. Don't talk.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. Ms. Campbell, I believe you were signaling for the mic.
Yes. To Mr. Susan's motion, Dr. Thetti or Mr. Gibbs, can you give us an example of a time that we would use, I think Mr. Gibbs was starting to go there, that we have used or that or the other places who have, since you've served in other places, Mr. Gibbs, would have used the rehab option that Mr. Susan is mentioning?
I don't know of any.
I don't know of any in our county, but I would imagine if somebody is abusing a legal drug, taking more than they should or more than they're prescribed, that would be a rehabilitation potential case. And the other thing I think to keep in mind is we're talking about marijuana, and we're talking about two different kinds. We're talking about the same thing, marijuana, but we're talking about it separate, medical marijuana and other types of marijuana. And that's the other piece that I think Mr. Gibbs was leading to, that changing what we do, changing our practice, will potentially set us up for not just heroin or cocaine, but for the recreational use of marijuana in the same situation.
May I ask one more question? Having this conversation leads me to the thought of, then why do we have option B, C, and D? We're not going to ever use it. Then why is it there as an option? It just, I'm with Mr. Susan. I just don't feel like that broad stroke makes any sense when there are very specific things to every single case. And again, it's just frustrating to me that we have an excellent teacher who has been serving our county, who has supports in this room, and we're not going to break. We were arguing that it's against the federal law, but now we found a route that it's not going to break the federal law by not terminating. And now the argument is that it's going to set a precedence for heroin addicted teachers to start working at our schools. It's like, what argument are we making? Again, it's unfair to this teacher that she's got the burden of future possible situations on her back. I don't think that's fair.
Can I call the question on this
Thank you,
motion?
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Is there any additional discussion on this particular? All right, I have a motion on the floor to approve the recommendation of the termination. Ms. Escobar, can you take
You have a
Wait.
motion to
The rehab.
to rehab.
Oh,
here.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs, for keeping me on track there. So I have a motion on the floor to deny the superintendent's recommendation for termination and recommend referral to rehabilitation. Correct, Mr. Gibbs? Ms. Escobar, you need a voice vote on that, correct? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. The motion fails 2-3. Which brings us back to the original motion. Recommendation for termination. Is there any discussion on the original motion?
Yes. I have a question. In the federal government, is it defined in Class 1 as marijuana or medical marijuana?
There is no medical marijuana in federal law. It's not recognized. There's only marijuana. Any derivative of THC is going to be illegal under federal law. It's a Schedule I narcotic. There is no recognized medical use for marijuana, period, under federal law. That's your problem here. It's like it's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. The feds need to downgrade it from Schedule I for there to be an acknowledged use. Schedule IIs are acknowledged medical uses, Schedule IIIs acknowledged medical uses. And you have hardcore drugs in those classifications.
I feel like doing a filibuster right now.
Ms. Jenkins, are you?
Yeah,
requesting?
so since we're entertaining the world of hypotheticals and potential futures, I would like to propose a hypothetical. We have 9,000 employees. It's safe to assume there are many others that probably have this medical marijuana card. I will argue that this might set a precedence for staff members to not get involved in situations where they're telling our students to follow the proper protocol so that they don't get put into situations like this teacher was put into, to potentially then have to be forced to be drug tested. I just want people to think about that too.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Any additional discussion? Ms. McDougall?
Just one thing. I just want to reiterate, we are following our policy. And I want to state that the state of Colorado, that has medicinal and recreational, their school systems have the exact same policy we have. I just want to state that.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Susan?
I appreciate that Colorado, and I appreciate everybody else, but I truly believe that we have an opportunity here to protect and get behind a teacher. So I'll make another motion. I'll make a motion that we don't support the superintendent's recommendation and pause and table this recommendation until after we've reworked our policy to come back so that we don't have this problem where we have this rehab and everything else.
I have a motion on the floor.
Let's
Do I have
change
a
the-
second?
Second.
I have a second on the motion. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Gibbs,
Yes.
would that have, if we changed the policy, would that affect this employee's decision? Because we're based, or would it have to be based on the policy as it stood at the time?
Right, yeah, I don't know that you can change it and enforce it retroactively. So it's going to be based on the policy as in place today.
No, there's laws that say that that they don't have to be grandfathered policies and everything else. I do disagree with that argument there.
You would be holding them to a different standard at the time. So the time that she took her action is whatever the test date was, and whatever the policy is then is going to be the standard that she's held to.
I would like to add to the motion that we would have no, I won't add anything to the motion. I would like to try to work this policy so that we could come back and save this teacher and postpone this superintendent's recommendation till afterwards. I know we can find a way through the law to where we don't have to make it retroactive. I got to believe that.
May I add something? So if we're going Mr. Susan's route and we're saying that it's retroactive and we're now making the argument that this is setting a precedent, well, whoever in the future is using heroin is now working off of our new policy, correct?
Any violation will be on the policy in place at the time
Right.
that the violation took place.
So the precedent that we're concerned about setting with this one would no longer really apply if the policy has changed, correct?
Depending on what the new policy said.
Right. So then that takes the burden of worrying about the precedent that we're setting for these potentially very addictive substances coming about. That would then take that off the table and that concern would no longer exist. Correct? Potentially, based off of what might be in the policy.
Yeah, I would have to see what the policy is to tell you the implication.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion to postpone?
Madam Chair, may I have a point of privilege? Just for point of clarification, because I believe Dr. Theddy was beginning to go there. Dr. Thady, can you clarify the situation that, I believe you're going to talk about the conflict that occurs between recreational use of marijuana by an individual with a medical marijuana card who tests positive as a part of the workplace. Am I correct?
That's correct. There is no distinguishing between medical marijuana on a drug test and recreational marijuana.
So, just respectfully, the discussion may not necessarily be as much about another Schedule I drug other than marijuana, but a decision other than the superintendent's recommendation may present the precedent that an individual who tests positive for marijuana, albeit from recreational use, with a medicinal marijuana card would be eligible for the same consideration. So I just wanted to did I get that correct, Dr.
Yes.
Thady? Okay. For a point of clarification for the board, I just want to make sure you fully understand what Dr. Thady was presenting as part of the additional considerations.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. Is there any additional discussion on the motion which is on the floor for postponement?
Right. So I understand where we're going with this, but again, it's not whether or not this is legal. If we are putting some kind of discipline on this teacher, we're saying, yes, it's illegal, you broke the policy. If there's options A, B, C, and D, and we're not willing to be using B, C, and D, then why do we have B, C, and D? If we think that it's unfair to allow rehabilitation for someone who is using marijuana, then why do we have options B, C, and D? It just doesn't make any sense.
I believe Dr. Thady just clarified an answer to my question that the B, C, and D are for other type of situation. And one of them was to be retested, in which case we don't have to have that here because an employee, shared that she was using it. So, I mean, those other options are because that policy doesn't just cover the Class 1 drugs. It covers alcohol, right? It covers
Yes, it does.
Abuse of prescription drugs. And so those options, there are reasons to have them.
But the options don't explicitly state what they should be used to and what used for and what they should be applied for. That's our interpretation of it. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
Thank you,
So
Ms. Jenkins.
do we have to vote on Mr.
So I'd like one last statement. I didn't use any of my time during the workshop, so I'm doubling up. The other piece to this is I understand that it's hard for you guys to get over this hurdle. 2 weeks ago, when I sat inside Melbourne High School and I was substituting, I realized where our education's at. And I realized that as a former teacher, the stuff that I saw, we are on the brink of one of the biggest education crises in our country. And when we have teachers that are qualified and we lose them, we are in a position where we're not doing what was the #1 goal, which is holding kids to the highest standard. The problem is that we can always find a way to not make something happen. We can find a person that's going to sit out there and break the law somehow, and he's going to come in, it's going to come the sideways, and we can figure that out. That's going to happen. Or we can say, this is what's the right thing to do and save this teacher. And that's what this is about. We can sit there and say that somebody's going to go take this precedent, that the union's going to go find all the drug-addicted teachers inside the district that are busted, and they're going to come through and they're going to do this. Or we can say, this is our teacher, she's a darn good teacher, and we're going to protect her. And that's what this is about. So I humbly ask the school board members to consider that in their recommendation, and with that, I'll be glad.
Thank you, Mr. Susan. So I have a motion on the floor to postpone. I have a second on that motion. We've had discussion. Is there any additional discussion before I call the question?
I do want to ask a question. Dr. Mullins had just, and I appreciate where you're going with that, saying that there's no distinction between medical marijuana and marijuana itself, but I do have a question. So if we had a teacher who tested positive for marijuana, there, is there no, I guess it's hard for me to understand if that person had a medical marijuana card, why they wouldn't then say, I have one, or why they would choose to withhold it. I feel like that would be part of the discussion, and I don't understand why they would hold that back. It doesn't seem like to be a defense for them. And again, I feel like that's that broad stroke for a narrow argument, because again, those wouldn't be the exact same situations.
Okay, so any additional discussion before I call question? All in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion fails 2-3. We're back on our original motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent for termination on this employee. Is there any additional discussion on the original motion?
I would like to make a motion that we remove B, C, and D as an option if we're not going to use it because we're worried about precedent.
So while I respect that motion, Ms. Jenkins, you can't motion to change a policy. The policy has to go through a change proposal or a change process. So if you would like to request at another time that that policy come back for consideration, you can certainly do that, but it wouldn't be an official motion at the meeting that we could vote on. Are there any additional motions on the floor or discussion moving forward? Okay. Since I have been trying to keep us all going straight and really haven't had an opportunity to say much since the original discussion, Mr. Susan, I am with you that we should do what we can to change things going forward to support this teacher. Unfortunately, I am not. I voted against the motion because I do not believe that a ruling from the Florida Attorney General on federal law is going to get us where we need to go. So I would certainly support, and if it's something you want to work collaboratively on going forward, and doing what we can to advocate for the necessary changes at the federal level, which would allow us to have a policy change at the local level, I am all in favor of that. But multiple attorneys that I have spoken with throughout this process have indicated that we need to uphold the superintendent's recommendation on this. And so that's what I will be doing this evening. And I'll be happy to work with you going forward on seeing what we can do, you know, on the larger scale. Okay?
What if we petitioned the U.S. Attorney General, since that's where it domiciles? Would you be okay with that? I'm not making a motion.
I'm fine with us reaching out to the Attorney General, but I don't think it impacts the here and the now. I think we have to change things going forward and not retroactively is you know, all of the guidance that I have been given. So that's where I will stand. You're welcome. Is there any additional discussion before I call the question? Ms. Escobar, do you need a voice vote on this one, or you can take electronic? All right, hearing no further discussion, please vote.
I don't have anything, I'm sorry.
Can you refresh?
If I don't, do we have to vote?
Yes, we do, Mr. Susan. Ms. Jenkins, are you having technical difficulties as well?
I got it.
Okay. And the motion passes 3-2.
And I will interject that she has requested a hearing before the board under the statute. So we will move forward with scheduling that hearing with the board.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Okay, we are going to move on to the action agenda. Dr. Mullins.
The first item is G30 on board-directed guidelines for indoor singing.
For board clarification, this item is not a recommendation from either the superintendent or the staff. So for this item to be considered, it would require a recommendation from the board with a motion followed by a subsequent vote. So
Move to approve.
Mr. Susan is moving to approve what? Because there is no recommendation before us. So you're going to have to make clear what you are moving to approve.
I thought, Dr. Mullins, you were going to bring forward, I'm sorry. I thought, Dr. Mullins, you were going to bring forward how that process looks.
So for a process, the superintendent has provided the feedback that we requested as a board in, I think it was February, I've lost track at this point, but the superintendent brought forward the information that we had requested be brought forward, but it is not coming as a superintendent recommendation. So, Mr. Susan, you can certainly move to approve the plan put forward to accommodate indoor singing, but it's not, typically we get a recommendation from the superintendent, so we move to approve that recommendation.
Sure.
We do not have a recommendation on the floor.
We have guidelines for teachers and administrators that has been drafted by our district, but not brought forward as a recommendation. I move to approve those guidelines.
So Mr. Susan has moved to approve the guidelines as presented. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
There's a second from Ms. Campbell. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Can I say something?
Ms. McDougall?
I normally don't talk this much. I just want to just get this off my thought. I'm concerned that our schools have been able to follow the recommendations that were put forth by the Department of Health and our task force. And we have had outdoor concerts, performances, especially at a high school in my district, that was phenomenal, where the singers wore masks, outdoors, the dancers wore masks, and so did the orchestra, and it was pretty phenomenal. So I get concerned when we're not going to follow our medical experts on this particular issue. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Is there any additional discussion?
I have a question because I'm a little confused about what just happened prior to all this. So are we moving, are we voting to either allow or not allow indoor singing with this?
The motion on the floor was to move forward with the plan that was provided as provided with no amendment. That's the motion that's on the floor.
Okay, I do have a question. Because as much as I advocated for this, I am with Ms. McDougall in the sense of I have been erring on the side of science. I have been listening to our Department of Health. I respect their opinions. They are the medical experts. I am not. But I do have a genuine question. One that I think is warranted, and I think that our students and the parents that came here to speak on behalf of this would probably ask themselves, and was the DOH questioned or involved in those other activities that are taking place that were mentioned during all of those public comments? Were they part of that consideration as well? And I mean that genuinely. I want to know the answer to that.
Absolutely. So they were. The DOH sits on our reopening task force. And all of that information was put together from the reopening task force as a whole, and then brought forward to the board for approval on the reopening plan. The board did not approve everything, but the reopening plan was approved by the board, and the Department of Health and the reopening task force, which is made up of multiple staff members along with DOH, were a part of that. Dr. Sullivan, I see that you have entered the room. Did you want to respond specifically to Ms. Jenkins' question, or did I sum it up? Okay. Does that answer your question, Ms. Jenkins?
So the DOH made a recommendation when it comes to, and I'm bringing this up because it was brought up a million times in public comment, basketball, wrestling, they made statements on that.
So what the DOH said was, when asked by the board, if you recall the 12-hour meeting or whatever it was that we had,
yes.
Where the board very clearly asked if the medical experts in the DOH supported the recommendations that had been placed into the reopening task force. They did, in fact, indicate that they supported what had been brought forward to the board.
Ms. Belford, are we sure that they didn't have some qualms about allowing specific sports? I mean, I'm confused on that because I thought they did.
And it looks like maybe Dr. Sullivan's coming forward. The Department of Health did not indicate concerns with the recommendations that were being brought forward, but
also
our reopening task force
that
maybe.
was also the return to activity plan, which was actually implemented before the reopening plan started, and some of that, remember when even early in the summer when we restarted with that, and I don't know, Dr. Sullivan can answer how much of that, because the reopening plan doesn't necessarily specifically address athletics as much as the return to activity plan did.
That's correct, and it is a difficult distinction because of the various decisions that were being made at the time. Chris Moore will be joining us, and she can be a little bit more exacting on the return to activity plan. But the return to activity plan was in response to board requests and directives regarding athletics and guidelines provided by FHSAA in regards to athletics. Some of those decisions were changed along the way by the board. For example, we had originally said no outside of the district contest, and then the board at one of its meetings, I apologize, I don't remember the date, asked us to change it. So there's been some changes to that process. So the original guidelines were in response to combination board requests and guidelines presented by the FHSAA, and then modified accordingly along the way. So Chris Moore will be able to better speak to the Department of Health's direct input on the return to activity plan, but I don't believe it was a direct input.
Okay.
And she just stepped away, so I'm very confident that she'll be walking in, but I do believe it was less direct input than in the other things that were mandated in the reopening plan. This was a reopening plan recommendation, and so the health department weighed in on it.
Right.
As we're waiting on Ms. Moore to get here to clarify on that, Ms. Campbell, you had a question?
Yeah, so I appreciate the concerns that you share, Ms. McDougal, Ms. Jenkins. I would just say that, I don't actually expect the I wasn't surprised, I'll say that the Department of Health was unwilling to go along with these guidelines because the CDC has not changed their position on singing since the beginning of the year, and I have my opinion on that, which I'll be happy to share. When you look on the CDC guidelines for COVID for schools or churches or any other organizations, they talk about singing. They refer back to the original studies that were done, the case studies of choirs where there were breakouts. People weren't masked, people were all together, and they have not updated their recommendations. Just like we've done with athletics, we've looked at FHSAA and other organizations. Even our return to activity plan also addressed not just sports, but like marching band camps and things like that. Those guidelines weren't based on anything with the CDC. The CDC was barely coming out with how to open schools back in the summer. Those were based a lot off of the National Band Masters Associations and those kind of recommendations. So when we talk about singing, we referred a lot last month to the studies that were done, especially the University of Colorado Boulder study, and because that is where the national organizations for the performing arts, especially band and chorus, that's where they, said, hey, give us some research, do something specific on us. So the CDC never updated. They haven't really looked at those studies. They're still relying on those early cases. And so when we look at the most recent, and again, like we said last month, our choral programs, the research is showing that with the same mitigation strategies, the choral programs around the country in this study have had the same effectiveness with the mitigation strategies of reducing aerosols as the band programs with similar recommendations. We have been allowing our bands to follow those recommendations this whole entire school year, but our choruses we have not. And so I understand why the Department of Health wouldn't, because they're going to kind of stick with the CDC, and they're not, we've got a lot of, it has to be peer reviewed or whatever, but I am really honestly excited to have some guidelines that puts our chorus on the same playing field, the same opportunities as what our bands have been able to do all year long. And it's still pretty restrictive. Actually, it's really restrictive, but it's better than what we've been doing right now. So that's why I'm happy to support the guidelines, and I appreciate the staff for putting them together.
So Ms. Moore has joined us to address your question, Ms. Jenkins.
I want to make sure I have the correct question. Could you ask it again, please?
Yeah, so I was just asking if the DOH was explicit or had any direct response to a lot of the things that our public comments had brought up, like basketball and wrestling.
You mean within the plan when we were making the return to activity plan?
Yes.
The DOH came out, our local DOH came out and was not in support of a resumption of athletics. We moved forward based on what we were asked to do. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I asked that for that very exact reason, because the parents and the students came here for hypocrisy reasons, right? And wanting to have equity, and that's the same argument you're making. And I think that's really important for us to address. And I agree with you. Our bands are performing inside. We've been doing this all year round with them. I just think it's something that we need to kind of remember.
Any additional discussion? Okay. I will say that I have extreme concern about a direct recommendation not to move forward with the plan that was put together by staff. And I want our kids to have the freedom too. I want them to be able to sing. I want them to have as many restrictions lifted as possible. But I think it bears recognition or consideration that our reopening plan was developed specifically to minimize loss of instructional time, right? To keep us from having outbreaks in our schools where we had to shut down schools, to keep kids from getting COVID and missing instructional time by not being able to be in class. And certainly there has been a lot of lost instruction as well, right? Through quarantines, which I too am very familiar with at this point. But I think for me, the thing that truly stands out is the fact that when we started our athletic program, we started it in the summer before school started, and we were able to see what the impact was of the mitigation strategies that we put into place. And I would not be being honest with you all if I didn't tell you that I have great concerns that we are pushing through at the end of March on recommendations, or not recommendations, on guidelines that are specifically not recommended by the Department of Health. I think that's just a very dangerous place to go, and I understand the desire for the freedom, but I also understand that we have graduation around the corner. We have exams around the corner. We have, and so, I think it was clear in the information that we were given that there's a pretty good, and Ms. Moore, feel free to give me a thumbs down if I'm misinterpreting, but I feel like there was pretty good indication that the Department of Health and the staff would likely support the program that has been put forward next school year, or felt fairly confident that we would be at a place where they could support a recommendation for indoor singing next school year. I also know that we're soon going to be considering the Summer Fine Arts program. I would suggest that that is a great place for us to test out the mitigation strategies and ensure that they're working without us infringing on student academic opportunities between now and the end of the school year. And so like I said, I get where everyone's coming from. I'm very uncomfortable with putting this plan into place at this point in the school year, when we're almost to the finish line. Is kind of how I'm looking at it. So that's my way in. If there is any additional discussion.
I do want to ask too, did the Department of Health have a recommendation when it comes to band performances and how we're doing that?
No, we haven't changed what we originally set out with the reopening plan. Our impression was they didn't explicitly realize how much band was going on. And given their scope of responsibility, I, of course, would not necessarily expect them to have that minutia. When we explained what was already allowed, at that point, we haven't changed what we've been allowing throughout the year. So I have no answer to that. I don't think.
No, the only references the most updated information I sent you guys earlier this week. I think that really encapsulated the findings that they are looking at the state of Florida and what the resumption of school and activity meant to the COVID and spread or lack thereof based on activity. So that came directly from the DOH, and I think it was pretty succinct.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
So, thank you guys. The reason I'm asking all of these questions is because I really want this for our kids, and I think it's a really, really restrictive guideline. And I struggle with my decision because I err on the side of caution when it comes to COVID. I trust our Department of Health. I trust the recommendation, but I am also confused why we didn't seek their recommendations for every other thing that we're doing, and why they were sought out for this. I'm just confused by that.
So the Department of Health did participate in all of our recommendations. That doesn't mean they recommended it. They participated every conversation that we had about COVID, from the very beginning in March to the reopening to the activity to the music. Sometimes they just quite frankly didn't recommend it.
Right.
And there were times that we were asked to put together a plan regardless of that recommendation. So
Okay.
I want you to know they participated fully in all of the decision making and all of the recommendations we move forward. Sometimes they just disagreed with the recommendation they disagreed with what we were asked to produce.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the board that was here voting on that at the time was given that information, correct?
The Department of Health was alongside us for those 24 hours in a 2-day period in the presentation of the reopening plan. That was included the health department in the development of the plan.
Okay.
And so they participated in all the meetings, the development of the plan as it was presented, and they were physically here with us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Jenkins, if I could, Ms. Moore has alluded to it a couple of times. But I think it's important to understand what she is saying when we were asked to do things. So the governor oversees the Department of Health. He also, he appoints the entire board at the Department of Health, and certainly can and has encouraged the Department of Health to follow the guidelines of the CDC in providing guidance to districts, right? The Florida High School Athletic Association also had a medical committee which did not recommend resumption of athletics. The Florida High School Athletic Association board, which is separate from their medical committee, was quite frankly pressured by the governor, who very publicly stated that he wanted athletics to resume, to develop guidelines for resumption of activities in schools. And the governor made it very clear that they expected districts to resume athletics. And I say that I'm not trying to sway or anything like that, but I think Ms. Moore was very gracious in simply saying that we were doing what we were told we had to do, in providing those recommendations and doing it as safely as they possibly could. And I know, because I know you watched most of that, but I wasn't sure how much of that you were aware of. And I think most of our public is probably not aware, as we've heard many people ask about the return to sports compared to the other things. I would suggest that it speaks volumes that the governor pressured the return to sports and did not pressure the Department of Health to support return to other activities as well.
And I appreciate you being super candid with that. My question though is, again, because I wasn't on the board for this, but was there a consequence for not doing it? For not following through with that?
There was nothing explicitly stated as a consequence for us not following that direction from the governor, no.
All good? I'm going to call a question.
Any additional discussion?
Let's vote.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to implement the recommended mitigation strategies to move forward with indoor singing. Is that sufficient, Mr. Gibbs? And I have a second on that motion. We've had sufficient discussion. Ms. Escobar, do you need a voice vote on that one?
As you stated, I have approved board directive guidelines for indoor singing. If that's not good enough, then we'll take it.
That's fine. Okay, so I would ask all members to please vote.
You got to refresh. Mine does it all the time. Mullins has my computer.
Hang on a
I
second.
had to shut it off over there.
They switch computers on you?
No, Mullins just keeps pulling the plug over here, so
Oh.
I can't vote.
Disconnecting your internet?
Oh, goodness. All the anticipation.
Right? Is it coming back for you, Ms. Jenkins?
Yep.
All right, and the motion fails 2-3. All right, we are moving along with our board members. Just for your knowledge, my plan is to get through this action agenda and then take a quick recess for restroom breaks and refreshment before we move on to the public speaking. Are you guys good with hanging in for a couple more minutes? Okay. All right, Dr. Mullins, I believe we are moving on to 31.
Item G31 is on procurement solicitations.
What are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Dr. Mullins?
It will be G32 that you're going to.
Did you get that?
Yes. Item G32 is to hold a public hearing and approve the secondary 7 through 12 English Language Arts textbook adoption beginning with the 2021-2022 school year, pending DOE approval and budget considerations.
Move to approve.
Hold on just one second. I need to do my public hearing pitch. Is there anyone here who has come to speak on the secondary 7 through 12 English Language Arts textbook adoption? Is there anyone here who has come to speak on the secondary 7 through 12 English Language Arts textbook adoption? Hearing none, the wishes of the board.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by Ms. McDougall. Is there any discussion? All right, please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. Okay, Dr. Mullins, 33.
Item G33 is to hold a public hearing and approve the elementary ELA, English Language Arts, instructional materials adoption.
Is there anyone here who has come to speak to the elementary ELA instructional materials adoption? Is there anyone here who has come to speak to the elementary ELA instructional materials adoption? Seeing none, board members, please vote. Oh, wait, what are the wishes of the board?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Susan, seconded by, who was that, Ms. Campbell? Any discussion? Please vote. And the motion passes 5-0. All right, at this time, I am going to call a 10-minute recess for us to refresh, and we will resume with public comment. All right, we are back in session and are going to be moving directly into public comment. Before we get there, I just want to let everyone know if anyone left an item in the restroom, ladies' restroom specifically, please see the deputy down here near the exit. They have your personal possession. All right, we are going into public speaking. Since it has been a while since our last group of public speakers, I'm going to try to quickly revisit the expectations just so we're all on the same page. So each speaker is going to be limited to 3 minutes. We have a clock in front of me to help you keep track of your time. When your time is over, you will be asked to stop and allow the next speaker his or her turn. Always keep in mind that reasonable decorum is expected at all times, and your statement should be directed to the board chairman. As chairman, I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when time is up, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. Should an individual not observe proper etiquette, I may request the individual leave the meeting. Let's all encourage an environment appropriate for our children who may be present or watching from home. Please note that in order to finish our business for this evening, board members will not have the opportunity to respond to speakers during or immediately following public comments, but they may request an addition of a board discussion item, or I may direct you to a staff member that can assist with your issue. So, we're going to start with our first 3 speakers, Laura Cobb, Bill McKay, and Chelsea Partridge. Laura?
Members of the board, I'm Laura, give her pronouns. Tonight I want to talk parent to parent with you. Thank you for this opportunity to share my story of motherhood. When my son was in 8th grade one night...
Laura, can you move a little closer to the mic for me? Thanks.
Can you hear me now? Hi. When my son was in 8th grade, one night in January of 2019, I was readying myself for bed, checking out on my phone when I saw an email from him sitting in my inbox. My son and I text, we DM on Instagram, we FaceTime, we share Reels and TikToks, but we don't email. I knew something very significant was happening when he emailed me. In a nutshell, he wrote, "Dear Mom, I know how proud you are of your daughters, but I don't feel like a girl. I feel like a boy, and I'm sorry. Will you please help me through this?" He literally apologized. I was overcome with emotions, fear, confusion, love, concern, understanding, but above all, pride. I was so proud of him. Since the day my baby was born, the consistent language in his home has been, "You can be anything you want to be." But even before he was born, as a fetus developing in my womb, during the first trimester of my pregnancy, his little baby body was developing his genitalia, just as yours did in utero. And then months later, as my pregnancy progressed, his brain developed. By the time he was born, his gender identity and sexual orientation had been developed. There is simply no scientific evidence to suggest otherwise. During pregnancy, the female body will either produce a wave of testosterone that affects fetal nerve cells or it won't. If it doesn't, the brain will develop as female. If it does, male. You can do and be anything, our parents said to us. We say to our children, but you have to be prepared to back that up. More importantly, more important than the gender of my child, is the fact that children are not born simply good or bad, and we should never give up on them. They need adults who will help them become caring, respectful, and responsible for their communities at every stage of their childhood. Every person here tonight who is concerned about your LGBT guidance and the Parents' Bill of Rights is concerned about how it will affect their children. My son, who was assigned female at birth, but has apparently made a very bold move to live according to how his brain was developed in my womb, simply wants to go to school, trust his teachers and administration, run his small business, interact with peers, socialize the best he can during a global pandemic, while acing high school and the SATs and preparing for college, and I quote him here, "and then just live a quiet life in some small American town as a contributing member of society." My son doesn't want anyone else's scholarships. It's not the Olympics, it's childhood, and all children deserve to play and learn from sports, to use a bathroom they feel comfortable in, and to trust that their teachers and guidance counselors at school will protect them.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Bill McKay?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill McKay. I'm the past president and current board member of Space Coast Pride. As a member of the LGBT community, I came out to my family at the age of 16. and I know how it feels to hide my true self and live in fear. No child should have to feel that fear and pain. All children should have a safe and affirming environment and be able to be themselves. I'm a resident, of Brevard County and have grandchildren attending Brevard Public Schools. I'm here speaking in support of this board to maintain the guidelines which have been in place without incident since 2016. I'm also speaking for many of our community, that wanted to be here tonight but were unsure of the safety of their children to attend this meeting. And I would like to actually thank you all for paying attention to our request for that. Anti-LGBT groups and others responsible for the hateful rhetoric and circumstances that occurred at our last meeting. I believe our community is being used to further the politics happening in Tallahassee. It's unfortunate the adults in our state that are elected and should be protecting our community are marginalizing, and using our youth for their own purposes. All our youth deserve better. The sad fact is that all children do not live with accepting and affirming families. Can you imagine the LGBTQ student who may live with families such as those that were here at the last meeting?
So I'm gonna stop your time so that I can address, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I would just ask that you keep comments directed to us and not personally directed to others, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Then I'll ask, can you imagine to be outed by a counselor or school official? Schools should be safe and affirming space where students can be free of fear and can express themselves in positivity. Teachers and counselors are trained and more than capable to determine when and if a student's family should become involved. We need to trust them to do their jobs as they have been doing for the last 4 years. Unnecessarily outing a student can put that student at risk in numerous ways. In closing, our students should be just that, students, not pawns. As adults, we are responsible to protect and allow them to be their full and true self. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, Bill. As Chelsea Partridge is approaching, our next 3 speakers will be Catherine Hagan, Lewis Schaefer, and Thomas Jefferson.
Good evening. My name is Chelsea Partridge, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Space Coast Equality Coalition. Some of us attended the March 9th board meeting and spoke in support of the LGBTQ district guidelines. I want to thank you for continuing to affirm those guidelines and for your response at the last meeting. So some of us were here at the last meeting. There are less of us here tonight. I have for you, and I can deliver these after my comments or at the end of the meeting, letters from 34 of our supporters that did not feel safe coming tonight based on the behavior of people at the last meeting. These are 35 people that took time to write letters to you all, and I really hope you'll take the time to read these. And I would like to applaud you for tonight, for making us feel safe. But I want to tie on that thread of safety. If students did not, and parents too, did not feel safe coming to a school board meeting tonight, how are they going to feel if the same body decides to out them under the guise of parental rights? At the last board meeting, members stated that they wanted to apply Florida High School Athletic Association rules for trans students' participation in sports to all trans students, outing them to their parents. Requiring parental permission to play in sports where students are bused across the county, sometimes not even getting back until late in the day, makes sense. But requiring parental notification to simply exist as you are and to step in a classroom is a dangerous, unprecedented, and unnecessary. This idea would not benefit our students. It's not being asked for by the parents of our LGBTQ students, and would only provide comforts to those that are spreading misinformation about our students and their experiences. Respectfully, I hope the board members have had time to reflect on this since that last meeting, especially knowing now that one of you was a Gay Straight Alliance sponsor, so I know you must know how dangerous outing a student can be. We all saw what happened at the last board meeting. Not all parents are safe and affirming. What if a child someday comes out to their counselor feeling like that is a trusted space, and then they are outed to a family that is not supportive? Who are they going to turn to then if they are being abused? They're not going to go to the same counselor that just outed them and made them be put in an unsafe situation. And we all want our children to speak up if they are going through that. The Family Acceptance Project, it shows that LGBTQ youth who face high levels of family rejection are 8 times more likely to commit suicide. Please protect our students. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thanks, Chelsea. Catherine Hagan.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Hagan. First, Madam Chair and members of the board, I would like to thank you and members of the BCSO for the increased security tonight. It made a huge difference. It was nice not to cross that gauntlet on the way in. The unfortunate display of hatred, vitriol, anger, and general unpleasantness that we saw last week, unfortunately, is a reminder that people have many opinions on this subject. And certainly parents across our own community have opinions that range from affirming and safe to rejective, angry, unsupportive. I myself grew up in a family where Archie Bunker would have been considered a bleeding heart liberal. I was not able to come out in that family. I waited until I was 51 years old to come out to my father. As a 76-year-old, frail old man, I was still scared of him. He has no control over me, no power. I'm the one that decides what home he's going to in a few years. But yet, I was afraid. What was I afraid of? The loss of his love. That's all he has to give me now, his love. What if I was 15 and needed him for a roof over my head, or food, for clothing, for shelter? Would have made a big difference. I didn't come out. I wasted 30-some years of my life. Failed marriage, years of depression, anxiety, hundreds of hours of therapy. We watched this board anguish a few minutes ago over making a decision handcuffed by inflexible policy. Seemingly no options. Consider the position of a counselor, ethically bound to do no harm, yet required by policy to out a child to an unsupportive family? Where does that put them? What is that quandary for them? How do they reconcile that? The existing policy was wise to remain silent on the issue. It neither prohibits nor requires parental notification. It leaves that decision to the experts. Counselors with a master's degree or more in psychology, human behavior, and years of experience in the field. Let the experts work on this. Don't make a one-size-fits-all answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Lewis Schaefer? Lewis left. Thomas Jefferson?
Oh, I'm sorry. First, I'd like to start by sharing my deep disappointment with our elected school board's officials and how they orchestrated the last school board meeting. Our local Brevard County residents, consisting of Christian patriots, came to speak at the meeting at 4 o'clock to secure a chance to speak and attend the meeting, well before the LGBTQ nation showed up, many of them not even residents of Brevard County, at which time school board officials, Jenny Jenkins, came out and
Sir, I'm gonna stop your time, so I'm not taking away your time, okay?
Okay.
I'm just gonna remind you of the expectation that comments be directed to the board chair as opposed to personally directed at any board members or audience, okay?
Yeah, I'm speaking to you, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Came out and privately escorted the whole group of LGBTQ inside the building and then shut the doors and placed sheriffs at the doors to keep us out. This board would like to use COVID-19 as their excuse for the capacity restrictions. However, if you read the school board policy, it simply states that masks are required if you cannot socially distance at 6 feet, which means that you can actually allow everyone in the room together as long as they are wearing masks. With all that being said, it was a simple ploy to silence our opposition to this evil LGBTQ agenda.
So, sir, I'm going to interrupt you one more time. Make sure that it's not personally directed. We're not name calling. We're not pointing out groups. We're not
I'm
calling
sorry,
any-
is
we're
there a
not
problem
calling,
with the word evil?
Yes, sir. You're calling a group of people evil and the
No, I'm not
the
calling a
policy
group of
evil.
people evil. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I would also like to remind this board that you are elected to represent the majority of our constituents, not the minority of our constituents. And the majority of the people in Brevard County oppose any and all LGBTQ policy changes or implement in our schools. There may be a minority, possibly 3%, that would support such a policy. However, the 3% will not get you reelected. There are some people out there that like to label us as a hate group. However, I want to make it perfectly clear here and now. We hate the sin, not the sinner. Okay? I'm going to say that again. We hate the sin, not the sinners. We are the Christians of Brevard County and all over the world will not sit silent and allow you to push your evil, sinful policies on our children. As I have stated before in the previous emails to the board members, we will make sure that all members that do not take a stand against these anti-Christ LGBTQ agenda policies, that we will vote you out next election cycle. This is God's country and God will be done. We the people have spoken. To God be the glory.
Thank you, sir. All right, our next three speakers, Lisa
Ms. Belford.
Beal. I'm sorry.
Ms. Belford, I just want to, you are in control of this 100%, but I just want to throw this out there. I am concerned that we're allowing comments that our students can hear and are probably watching from home that are calling them sinners. I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Next three speakers, Lisa Beal, Alexander Sands, and Jacob Gelman.
May I quote scripture? Is
Sure.
that possible? Okay. I would like to quote Matthew 18, verse 6, chapter 18, verse 6. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck to be drowned in the depths of the sea. The rainbow is a sign from God in the story of Noah in the Bible, that he would never again end the world with a flood. Next time will be fire. I just wanted to say that. Anyway, remember the schools, the teachers, the sports, and extracurricular activities are for the children and not the other way around, as your mission statements quote, to serve every student, the children, excellence as a standard. I've been a resident of Brevard County for 45 years. I went to Edgewood, and I graduated from Merritt Island High School in 1983. My mother taught art for 30 years in this county. She also worked at the school board. She was in charge of when they had the art administration position. Claire Loveridge was her name. My uncle, Dan Geronimo, taught history at Satellite Beach High School for 30 years. My children were educated here in this county as well. My youngest daughter had Mr. Susan for her history teacher at Eau Gallie High School. I'd like to thank you personally because you made such an impact on my daughter, Stephanie, and you're an excellent educator. That's why we both voted for you.
So Lisa, I'm just going, just to make us all on the same page, just try to avoid pointing out individual board members, okay?
Yeah, you
Thank
made an Indian lesson. Can I tell about a lesson that he taught that really came alive? He made an Indian lesson come alive. They constructed a huge teepee. She still talks about it. It was about 9 or 10 years ago. My daughter's 25 right now. And they all dressed as Indians. And I wonder if in this present day of cancel culture, that such a fantastic lesson would be allowed you know? So anyhow, thank you. I can honestly say that no teacher when I was in school in this county ever discussed my sexuality in any classroom, as they knew it wasn't their place to do so. I know that no one ever considered outing either. And hearing this word just, I just don't know what to think. Because back then, nor did, that didn't occur in any of my mom's classrooms. And she taught elementary, middle school, Clear Lake Middle School. She taught at Cambridge Elementary in Cocoa. She taught at Rockledge High School, art and photography. She also taught at UCF. I know that's not Brevard County's public schools, but the job as an educator is to educate core curriculum, not sexual identity. My Uncle Dan as well, and I doubt in Mr. Susan's classrooms that any sexuality was ever discussed. I
Thank
never
you,
heard
Lisa. We appreciate you joining us this evening.
Dr. Ben Carson said the
I'm
pushing
sorry.
of left-wing
Lewis,
transgender
audio,
ideology
please.
is considered
Please step away from the mic. Thank you. Alexander Sands, followed by Jacob Gelman, and then Michael Bloom. Alexander?
Before I begin speaking to the board, I would like to apologize prematurely if I lose consciousness anytime because I've suffered poisoning last night. Fortunately, happens. I'm Alex. I'm an 18-year-old student of Eastern Florida State College, an active member of Boy Scouts and now Eagle Scout, and a former member of Lions Club International, as well as a transsexual individual. I am in support of protections for LGBT people in school because I myself faced intense bullying even before I figured out my identity, simply because I did not have a girlfriend. I was bullied for being gay, and I understand that if anyone seeks to abuse the protections that are being put in place, there is corporal punishment in the form of social ramifications that happens that will dissuade them from doing so. I firmly believe in the protections that should be put in place and the respecting of identities within school institutions, professionally and academically, considering we have protections for minorities of racial descent who sometimes in certain areas of our country make up a very small percentage of people. I believe it would still be fair to put in protections for minority gender identities. I say this wholeheartedly. We deserve to respect our students, and it is very difficult going through school as someone who has been outed or someone who hasn't and is not able to express themselves properly. So I would propose to the board that protections and rights be put in place, basic rights to allow students to flourish, improve their education, improve their mental health as well by doing these things, and overall give them a greater school experience. That way their education allows them to move forward as successful Americans in life and productive citizens, law-abiding, and that everything is respected properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Jacob Gelman, followed by Michael Bloom, and then Regina Osgood.
I'm Jacob Gelman from Melbourne. Dear world, dear America, and dear Brevard. This is a letter from those LGBT students tired of having their existence used as pawns to prove superficial points about liberty or religiosity. Those students being used as pawns today. Pawns made out to seem like bombs capable of blowing away the very fabric of this nation. Yet they do not seek harm or seek destruction. They are not the devil or any type of villain. They are not part of an agenda. They are people. They want security, the ability to participate in conversations regarding their humanity. But how can they do that when they're too busy worrying about their safety, too busy having daydreams about the people who don't even want them having air to breathe? Because it takes just one tragedy and they won't even be able to dream. People are busy discussing the rights of the LGBT student body, a body too scared to even come up to speak. Worried they're those so crazy they'll beat them up in government streets. And is it a far cry seeing the hatred in some people's eyes? You would think a terrorist had walked by. No, it was simply a student fighting for their rights. They want dignity, the ability to exist as themselves free from judgment or humility, to walk in school hallways as themselves outside of their identity, the right to autonomy, to determine what happens to their bodies and to their stories, to be free from oppressive ideology and from the dogma of another person's religiosity, the right to equality, not to be treated differently because of misconstrued ideas of liberty. Sincerely, those LGBT students too terrified to come and tell their own stories. And what a shame it is that we stand here discussing their right to privacy and we can't even see them speak. What a shame that there are those fighting for the denigration of their right to their own identity, those fighting to erase their right to exist freely, decide whether it's safe for their family to hear their story, those looking to make schools a police state for LGBT students trying to find community. How convenient for them that they push for such things while creating an environment so fearful they won't even have to look at those students in the eyes as they speak of their cruelty. Let's hear the students whom it will impact speak, not hand in letters behind screens. They're scared because they're scared they might get beat. If we ignore their words, this county will mourn the students lost because we thought it just to out them without a shred of concern for their dignity. Because we chose to listen to the parents whom they were scared to come out to publicly. Mourn the opportunity squandered because a child was rendered homeless, because a child was rendered homeless, and the hypocrisy supposedly doing it in the name of liberty. Let's not lose sight of the hypocrisy of outing students, sacrificing their security because we thought they had less of a right to liberty. And if one doesn't believe me, just wait one meeting and let the students whom it will impact speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Next is Michael Bloom. Michael, give me half a second, please.
Sure.
Okay, when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Belford and board members, for allowing the public to speak tonight. My name is Michael Bloom, and I live in Palm Bay. I serve on the executive board of the Brevard Homeless Coalition. I'm a founding member of PFLAG Melbourne Space Coast. I'm a guardian ad litem in the 18th Judicial District, and I sit on the district's Student and Transition Committee. I'm here tonight to talk about homeless youth, specifically LGBTQ homeless youth. In a perfect world, every child could speak openly to their parents about anything without fear. Unfortunately, that's far from a reality. When a youth picks another trusted adult to confide in, it is almost always because they fear a negative reaction from their parents. LGBTQ youth experience a negative reaction when coming out to their parents 50% of the time, and 26% are kicked out of their homes. 48% of youth that matured in a religious environment report having difficulty discussing their sexuality with their parents due to their parents' anti-LGBTQ beliefs. Every year, 1.6 million youth become homeless. 40% are LGBTQ. That's over 500,000 homeless LGBTQ youth every year in this country. 46% ran away because their family rejected their sexual orientation or gender identity. 43% were forced out by their parents. 32% faced physical, emotional, or sexual abuse at home from their families, from the people who are supposed to protect them. Homeless LGBTQ youth face a greater risk of assault, trauma, engaging in sex for basic needs, and early death. 1 in 4 homeless youth was a victim of trafficking. 1 in 4. Or they had to engage in survival sex just to survive. 90% of youth who are trafficked by someone who's known to them. I was a guardian ad litem to a youth who was trafficked by their parents. The parents' rights were terminated. That child was placed with the grandparents, and the grandparents trafficked that youth again. Within 48 hours of running away from home, a youth will be approached by someone who wants to exploit them. Two-thirds of youth who run away from home in 48 hours are approached by somebody who wants to exploit them. This is the results of what can happen when students are outed. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Regina Osgood, followed by Joe Shim and Marta Field. Regina?
Superintendent, Chairperson, Bavard board members, and other dignitaries. Thank you for your time here tonight. I am Regina Lee, an Equality Captain for Equality Florida. Last meeting, I told you about my life and what I encountered growing up trans. No help, and I was assured of a painful, if not necessary, death if I was told on. I've made it. You've made a very positive guide for principals to deal with LGBT plus people in your school system. Also know how good your anti-bullying rules work. I have a friend that his children were in the elementary school. The son was ganged up on and attacked. The bullies were identified and proper corrections were administered quickly. And that's in Titusville. That was awesome. Last board meeting, I heard statements that were attributed to science. Only 2 sexes. It's not true anymore according to science. Intersex people exist according to a Google search today. 1.7% of the births are intersexed. WebMD says today about 1 in 1,000. They used to be called hermaphrodites. Clearly that invalidates the quote science that the board totally understands because the lawyer clearly and unequivocally read the laws out loud at the last board meeting. There was some disagreement from some of the speakers about telling the parents about LGBT plus by the school teachers and boards. I urge you not to. Last meeting, there was a group that we had to run the gauntlet through. They had young children shouting horrible things to anyone they thought might be LGBT plus. I do hope the family received a child welfare check. As a Brevard resident, I want you to know that you're really amazing as a board. Even though some of you don't necessarily agree with all the policies, you do understand the rules and have done the proper actions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Regina. Joe Shim?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to speak this evening. My name is Jo Shim. I'm a grandmother with 2 grandchildren who have gone through the Brevard school system. I am also president of the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast. As a national organization, League of Women Voters commits to making deliberate effort to ensure that the League is a place where differences are welcomed, different perspectives are respectfully heard, and every individual feels a sense of belonging and inclusion. We know that by creating a vibrant climate of inclusiveness, we can more effectively leverage our resources and advance our capabilities. Applied to the current situation, and as an organization with a strong investment in education policy, the League of Women Voters firmly supports the current school board non-discrimination policy and the current LGBTQ guidelines, which ensure that in Brevard and across Florida, there are clear procedures so that school administrators and staff follow the established policy and current law. This means that all students taking part in education activities provided in Brevard schools receive the same equitable treatment. The League of Women Voters of the Space Coast supports creating schools where all students are free from harmful rhetoric, bullying, and harassment, and where all students feel welcomed. We realize that not all students come from safe and supportive families. For this reason, it's very important that Brevard Public Schools provides an affirming environment where students are best positioned for success. The League of Women Voters of the Space Coast stands with members of the school board and urges them to continue their support for the non-discrimination guidance and maintaining policies to ensure Brevard schools provide a positive, equitable, and safe place for all students where they can learn and thrive emotionally and academically. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. All right, Marta, followed by Lacey Saxon and Dale Stenberg.
Good evening. I go by Tiki, if anyone needs to know that. But thank you again for allowing me to speak on behalf of some of the most vulnerable students from our amazing Space Coast communities. As a true Brevardian, born and raised in this county, I'm excited to continue to help mold and shape our policies. As a first-generation citizen of people escaping political and other persecutions from a communist country, this is an absolute honor to participate and exercise my constitutional rights and responsibilities. I recognize many of you when we work together to assist and advocate for the individuals with varying abilities and needs to access their private instructional personnel and not only avoid further aggression or losses, but to aid them in striving and meeting their individualized educational, behavioral, and other goals. Remember, these individuals did not choose their lives or circumstances, but we all have strived to support them as best as possible. Thanks to our work in Brevard County, at present, we are legislatively moving forward to assist similar students in that work statewide. Again, I thank you all. I'm here today to advocate for other students that didn't choose to be in this position. I'm here not only as a citizen, I'm here as a parent of 2 students of EPS, as a business owner, and as a person of the LGBTQIA+ community. Earlier today, I was able to participate in the We Venture program through Florida Tech. I was fortunate to be recognized by multiple individuals in 2 different categories: mentorship and community volunteering. I've also been recognized as the Manager of the Year for Brevard County. All of these things I have done to better our community, not just the communities that I am involved in, but everybody in Brevard County. I am again here today to advocate for every member of our community. As adults, we are the persons that set examples for our children, our neighbors, and our next generations. We are called upon to care for one another. I want to point out that the person I am and my beliefs are not much different than anybody else in this room, nor the people sitting at the tables in front of me. I have sleepless nights worrying about my children. I support a parent battling cancer. I drive to and from countless t-ball games and football games and practices, swim meets, and everything else. I strive to try to find time to hang out with my kids, to go boating and fishing and take advantage of everything that Brevard County has to offer. So in a lot of ways, we are more alike than we are different. I am also here as the president of the Association for Behavior Analysis of Brevard, as a board member for the Florida Association for Behavior Analysis as the incoming president-elect. And we are urging you to follow through in advocating and assisting these children and our community in reaching all of our needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiki. Lacey Saxon, Dale Stenberg, and then Shelley Rodden. Lacey here? Going once for Lacey, going twice for Lacey. Moving along. Dale Stenberg.
Good evening. My name is Dale Stenberg. I'm the president and headmaster of Pietist Classical Christian School in Melbourne. I want to thank you for your time this evening. I'm speaking as one educator to other educators about our common vocation. We stand in a long, grand tradition of people who have come before us in the noble task of educating children. Such a high calling should sober our thinking and humble our hearts. If we're to accomplish our mission well, we need to think wisely about the issues before us. Education was not originally designed for the mere purpose of entering a career or accumulating facts. Rather, it was intended to form virtue in children. The chief aim of educators was to be formative rather than instrumental. Seneca once wrote, "The period of education calls for the greatest and what will also prove to be the most profitable attention. For it is easy to train the mind while it is still tender, but it is a difficult matter to curb the vices that have grown up with us." Classically, while the whole person, including one's identity and emotions, are an important part of forming virtue, it is nevertheless the case that virtue cannot be formed apart from a motion towards truth. And therefore, education, precisely in its mission to form virtue, cannot allow itself to be derailed from brutal honesty about reality. And if we allow politics to decide concerning nature itself, whether a biological boy is a boy or a biological girl is a girl, then we abandon our calling to the truth. In fact, it is our job to tell politics what a boy and a girl are. To stray from this calling will not cease to make us teachers, but it will make us de-educators instead of educators, and that should weigh on our conscience. I assume that we all have a desire to watch our Brevard County citizens grow and flourish into well-balanced thinkers and productive citizens. This board is responsible for making decisions that affect thousands of boys and girls that grow to be men and women in this community. There's a very dangerous decision being made. If we politically obliterate the boundaries between biological males and females in vulnerable spaces, then we put children directly in harm's way. But what's more than that, we also will be creating an environment that will do damage to them psychologically and spiritually. In closing, I want to exhort the members of this board to think carefully about the precedent we set and also about the harmful implications of the ideology undergirding the policy. We are in a moment where we need to take up our calling with courage and tell anyone that would dictate reality
Thank you,
to
Dale.
us politically that we shouldn't
We
sacrifice
appreciate you joining
truth.
us this
Thank
evening.
you so much.
All right, Shelley Rodden, followed by Hannah Smith, and then Sherry Ashby.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins.
Shelley, if it's easier for you, you can actually hold the mic if that's.
Might need
Okay, whatever works for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shelley Rodden. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here tonight as Youth Director of Space Coast Pride. I advocate for youth because it's a passion of mine. I'm also a wife, a mother, and a former BPS employee. I spoke to you before about some of my personal experiences regarding why I'm so passionate about these LGBTQ youth. But I believe we're all here for this same purpose. We want happy and healthy children that thrive, and the mission statement behind you backs that up. Every student with excellence, and this is known. The LGBTQ youth that I work with are brave and beautiful. They are not monsters. They do not seek to harm their friends in bathrooms. They come from a large variety of diverse families, and we've heard this. While many homes are loving and supporting of these youth, many are not. These are the students that live in fear from their own parents simply for who they are or who they love. We've heard a lot about what happened at the March 9th school board meeting. One thing I'd like to note is not a single student spoke out in opposition to the LGBTQ guidelines. Quite the opposite. Many of our courageous students gave passionate speeches in support of these guidelines, the very protections that we are talking about tonight. the district policy that's been in place since July of 2016. They felt empowered, having their voices heard by adults that respected them. They are not here tonight because of fear for their safety, and their parents backed that up. As Chelsea said, we have numerous letters. They wish they could be here. They wish that they could thank you in person, but I'd like to thank you on their behalf. So it's really easy, and people are talking. They're uninformed. They're making snap decisions and spreading disinformation, primarily on social media, about a group of people that they know nothing about. And while the lover and the dreamer in me would love to educate the world, I know that that can't happen. This is 2021, and we are still okay with discriminating against people. In a public school, it is not okay to discriminate against any student. I don't see why this is an issue, especially youth. How is it ever okay to hate and discriminate against a child? I have a child with this disability. Is this next? We're going backwards. Look, the fight for equality is far from over. I will fight every day for these kids until I can no longer. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Hannah Smith. After Hannah is Sherry Ashby and then Michelle Zwack.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Smith. I am here today as a teacher to express how some of the decisions that you made as far as COVID-19 guidelines have harmed our youth that we are trying to protect. While we are attempting to keep these children safe, we are also harming them in the process with unintended consequences, some of which are far more reaching than the consequences of COVID-19. I teach English 3 to juniors at Merritt Island High School. My students have seen their high school experience slip away. Moments that make high school worth the hard work, long hours, and anxiety and pressure have been taken away from them. They walk around the school in masks, looking for a friendly smile, but they only see a sea of eyes. They've been forced to sit apart, can't work in pairs, can't sing and perform, but they can wrestle, and have been asked to isolate themselves for the sake of a virus that won't harm them. My students have not only been stripped of a high school experience, but they've been stripped of an education. The school calendar was put together in haste, splitting up the school year into 2 chunks. Students and teachers have been asked to squeeze a curriculum normally taught to a year into 4 months. We only had about a week, 2 weeks to prepare for that. All while I continued to test. I myself had to administer 3 tests to my juniors, resulting in, from what I've been told, 6 days of learning in a normal school year. My students sit in class, far from their peers, in desks for 6 hours a day, 90 minutes at a time. For my higher level AP students, they were asked to cram an entire AP curriculum into a semester, sometimes taking the exact exam in May, when their classes ended mid-January, while my other students struggled to even pay attention for 90 minutes. I asked students what was so hard about block scheduling, and they said, if I miss one day, I'm too far behind to catch up. We are rushing through everything. We scratch the surface and move on. I find that I don't even do the work. I just look at my answer on the phone, and we all know that the e-learners are definitely looking up every answer. I've seen my students grade torpedo. To me, this is worse than in the most damaging aspect of these policies. Students are quarantined for being in contact with the student and then asked to e-learn for 2 weeks. Some of the students have done this while they don't have a computer at home, and the school has said that they have given all the devices to full-time e-learners. That's 2 weeks, or I've been told 4 weeks in normal time, of learning that students miss out on. My students are stressed with the masks, block scheduling, lack of activities, and isolating, which has taken some of my former AB students to DF students. We are harming these kids more than COVID-19 ever will. My students who have had COVID had symptoms no worse than a stuffy nose. However, their academics, clear cheating, lack of understanding the material, have set up a generation of students to fail as adults. We are failing our children, robbing them of a childhood that we have had privilege enough to have, and for what?
Thank you, Hannah. We appreciate you joining
thank
us this evening. Sherry Ashby. Going once, going twice on Sherry Ashby. Okay. Michelle Zwack. After Michelle, we have Joyce Routh, Melinda Wimbish, and Ashley Hall.
I'm Michelle Zwack, and I'm here to advocate for a child's right to privacy.
Michelle, I'm going to ask you to just step a little bit closer to that mic so everybody can hear you, okay? Thanks.
I'm Michelle Zwack, and I'm here to advocate for a child's right to privacy. I'm a 55-year-old pansexual woman. I've given birth to 5 straight Brevard County children, and I promise I couldn't turn them gay if I tried. That's too bad. I'm a broker and own my own business, and I normally don't announce sexuality because it's nobody's business but mine. But we are discussing taking away a child's right to privacy about their own body. Every human, including children, have a right to privacy regarding their sexuality. Even though a parent brings them into this world, their life and their sense of being belongs to them and nobody else. Here's my experience. I realized around the age of 14 that I was attracted to both guys and girls. I was raised strictly Christian and to believe that this way of thinking was horribly sinful. I knew that God and my family and my friends would turn their backs on me for those feelings. But those feelings are natural and they plagued me. I felt sinful, dirty, and I was disgusted with myself. I would not dare to confess these feelings to anyone. I was completely alone in the world, and at 16, I felt so dirty that I swallowed 56 diet pills and Tylenol, cough syrup, aspirin, and whatever was in the medicine cabinet, so that I could end my life and not go on. I didn't want to be an embarrassment to God. I just wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. I counted every single pill until I couldn't see straight. I was high for about 3 days and weighed about 10 pounds less after days of vomiting, but I lived because I'm not a druggie and I didn't know the right stuff to take. But not all LGBTQ kids live through their suicide attempts. If you take away their right to privacy, it's your fault they're in this situation. Had I confessed my sexuality to my parents, I can promise you that my father would have beat me beyond recognition. He might have killed me, and that's the truth. And my mother would have stood by and let it happen because he was the man of the house. My family would have disowned me, and what could I do but hate myself? I was at a party one time and 2 of the boys snuck in some beer. One of the kids told their parents. Everyone at the party had to stand in front of the church and apologize for having to do it, even if you never saw it. Can you imagine if I had confided in one of these friends my sexuality and the feelings that were in my heart? This is way too much for a child to bear. It's just too much. Not all parents nurture their children. Not all parents protect their children. If a child or teen confides in a teacher or counselor, it's because they feel protected and they need assistance.
Thank you, Michelle.
Please respect their human right.
Joyce Ralph.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you for your service. My name is Joyce Ruth, and I live in Satellite Beach. I have 5 children. One is in Delora, and one is in Satellite High School. And I have 3 adult children, though, that have completed college, are contributing to our society, and are responsible taxpayers and voters. I am here today to request that the board approve a resolution to support a parent's Bill of Rights. Why? The current educational system is dividing children who are minors and not adults from their parents and implementing school guidelines without parental consult or knowledge. School teachers and advisors are being guided to withhold pertinent information about our children and the social environment in which they are immersed. I emailed each of you and was met with division on a recent response from a board member about her role on the board, which is clear that she divides parents from their children and sees her personal work experience superior to that of being a parent. When asked to support parents' rights, her response, and I quote, "As the representative with the most educational experience on the board, I was and still am in this role legally required to follow the federal and state requirements that dictate the role of schools in academics, mental health, and safety." This response did not demonstrate any support of parental involvement or decision-making in educating our children unless requirements are clearly written and explicit that she may need to follow. Extensive educational work experience is not superior to being a loving, concerned parent. It is unfortunate that parents even need to ask for a Bill of Rights, but it is evident in the last couple meetings that that is my concern and that we are going to need to have to ask for that. As parents, we need our rights spelled out in order for the board to acknowledge our role in the education of our own student. Without parents, there would be no children or students. So I am asking that you support our rights as parents so that together we can educate our children. Thank you and God bless.
Thanks, Joyce. Sorry I butchered your last name. All right. Melinda Winbush? Winbish? I probably butchered that one too, Melinda. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's phonetic. Hi, my name is Melinda Wimbish, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you, first of all, for your dedication to educating the students of Brevard County. My roots here are in Brevard, and they go back as early as the 20s when my grandfather moved here with dreams of being a citrus grower. He achieved those dreams, and he had citrus on the Indian River in North Brevard, which actually still, some of which are in our family. He met and married my grandmother, raised 4 children, and during his adult life spent, with the exception of time in World War II, basically most of it here in Brevard. My parents met here in Brevard as well. My mom was educated here and was a teacher at Apollo Elementary in the 60s under Principal Moon, which I've always thought is my favorite story in the history of the world about education, Apollo, Mr. Moon. My parents were married at St. Gabriel's Episcopal Church in Titusville in 1969, and they ended up relocating to Sanford, which is where I teach 4th grade, and I'm also a member of the Florida Bar. I was an attorney before that, obviously made a decision that educating children is much better than your job, sorry. So I have a devotion to both the Central Florida community and then also to children as well. In my family, we have 2 transgender members. My parents and grandparents have been very supportive of those members of our family. And one of those family members transitioned in the 80s. So before many of the protections that are now afforded people in our society, one of them is currently a student in your district. And so I'm very grateful that he is receiving the support of his teachers and his school board and his community. I think it's incredibly important that we support the equal treatment and complete dignity of all the trans folks, especially the children in our community. And to that end, in my family, I have been taught and raised as a lifelong Episcopalian that everyone is a child of God and that God loves all of his children. And I watched the last meeting online, and I've heard a lot of statements that seem to not go in line with my belief of my Christianity. And my Christianity tells me that all children are children of God. And to that end, public school told a different situation, but just felt like I needed to say that, to speak out on behalf of many Christians who do not agree with some of the things that are said on behalf of other people of faith. I am so in support of your mission to support the mental health of LGBTQ children. I won't go into, I have statistics, those have already been said, but the main thing is so many children don't feel safe anyway, let alone LGBTQ children. So giving them the ability to speak in a private way to a grown-up who will support them is imperative. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Melinda. Ashley Hall, and then last but not least, Carrie.
Hello, my name is Ashley Hall. I am the Brevard Chair for Moms for Liberty. I can't start this without just saying what a betrayal to our students that came here the last few meetings trying to get indoor singing, and every one of you said you would put that through with the guidelines, and for that to not pass tonight is a disgrace. I'm also here tonight for two other topics. One is to ask one of the board members if just one of you would pass a resolution in support of the Parents' Bill of Rights that's going through legislation right now. Like Joyce said, it's very important to parents to have a Bill of Rights. And then my second is to address the Department of Health comments from last meeting. So after listening to the supposed experts that were so graciously ushered in from the Brevard County Department of Health, giving their ever so confident expert opinion, however unable to accomplish the task at hand, which was to develop a metric as to when COVID mitigation measures can start to roll back. I reached out to Ms. Medlin to ask some follow-up questions to some of her and Mr. Inman's statements. Your experts admitted that the data shows that pediatrics do not transmit COVID-19 as much as adults, but they so confidently go on to say that daycares have a lot more transmission because that population of children are not wearing masks. I challenged that statement and asked for the data to support this opinion because my child has been going to daycare the entire time, and I believe there have been only 1 or 2 cases total among the adults the entire year. And the cases were more than likely transmitted outside of the daycare. Her answer, her evidence, an article from Utah from back in April and through July of last year. And the sample size of this particular article, three daycares in this article that she cites. A lot of words like likely, possible, probable. Also during this time period, testing was not nearly as available as it is today, so the article even states that the cases were assumed. That's your experts' evidence for her recommendation. So your experts were asked whether they've been seen adverse effects of mask wearing. They don't see pediatric patients. Why are we asking them if they have any adverse effects? They don't even see pediatric patients. Her answer was no. Lastly, they were asked whether the school would have had marginally higher cases. They said it had made a significant difference. Her answer was another article from Israel from May of last year. These were her answers to me in an email. I'm running out of time. Please pass a resolution for the Parent Bill of Rights.
Thanks, Ashley. Carrie?
Good evening, board. Thank you for your service. This has been a very emotional evening, and I appreciate you. My name is Carrie Gerace, and I'm here this evening to speak as a teacher of the Brevard County School District. I teach 3rd grade, and I currently have 14 brick and mortar students and 2 e-learners. Earlier in the year, I had as many as 6 e-learners. Actually, it doesn't really matter if you have 1 or 10. The added work of having e-learners on top of students sitting in front of you is more than twofold. I believe the idea or concept of hybrid learning had good intentions to keep students attached to their home school and have a smaller impact on our declining enrollment. I know that teachers, including myself, took on the task of learning new skills in order to be successful in this hybrid classroom environment because that is what we do. We step up to the challenge presented. As the fall progressed, many teachers were hopeful that parents would feel more comfortable about sending their students back to school, but we did not see a major influx of returning students. At the mid-year break, wishing for the return of normalcy, we were hopeful that the board would loosen their guidelines so that more students would return to brick and mortar classrooms. As we are now finishing the 3rd quarter of the school year, I would like to strongly encourage you to consider a policy for the next school year that does not include hybrid classrooms and e-learners. It is my opinion that to continue this stressful policy on your teacher workforce is not well advised. We stepped up to the plate. We did what we had to do for the success of our students, but we don't want to continue this policy into the next school year. The other concerns besides teacher fatigue that really must be mentioned and truly is the most important reason to be finished with this hybrid learning is that students are not as successful as they are in the classroom. The classroom experience just cannot be replicated. The mission behind you, as many tonight have said, is to serve every student. Can you honestly say to yourself that we are meeting this expectation with what we're doing today, or are we just making do to get us through? Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, the board wishes to thank this evening's speakers. Your willingness to join us this evening is appreciated. Is there any request for any addition to board discussion items this evening? All right. Then, does any board member have anything else they would like to report at this time?
Nope, go.
Dr. Mullins, do you have anything more this evening?
Nothing.
There being no further business, this meeting is now adjourned. Have a great night.